The King's Avatar audiobook by Kevin, Chapter 541, Guarded Secret. Okay, please follow me then. Let's hurry up so you two don't have to worry anymore. Ye Xiu added after Lord Grimm finished up the deal with the two guild masters. In the meantime, he was already slipping into the depths of the swamp. Taking Ye Xiu's words seriously, Changing Spring and Three Worlds Six Paths followed him without a moment's delay, leading their groups away. They soon arrived at the scene. Wei Chen's windward formation was leading 10 to 20 players, who were tangled in a fierce fight. Changing Spring and Three Worlds Six Paths were all veterans at boss fights. With a few glances, they knew right away that Wei Chen's group was mainly trying to control the boss instead of rushing to kill it. Their worrying hearts finally settled down. Clearly, the other party had been dragging out the fight until the deal could be sealed. Having roamed Heavenly Domain for so long, Wei Chen knew the big shots from the big guilds better than Ye Xiu did. He saw Changing Spring and Three Worlds Six Paths names a while ago. With a skillful dash, Windward Formation moved through the battlefield and greeted the newcomers enthusiastically. "Guild leader, do you want to take over the aggro? Or do you prefer to have us join your party? Relax, additional service won't cost you any extra." "That won't be needed," Changing Spring replied coldly. Taking it as a signal, people from Blue Brook and Samara charged at the boss. "You two guilds are trying to split one boss. This is going to be intense." Wei Chen muttered his comment while stopping his people from attacking the boss. The transition that followed went smoothly since everyone was familiar with the process. At the same time, Changing Spring was starting to believe that the extremely shameless person mentioned by Ye Xiu might actually exist. Why? Because the person known as Windward Formation was roaming and laughing directly in front of him without feeling any discomfort whatsoever, even though the guild tag of Blue Brook Guild hovered above his character's head. Even if he were a spy, he should still feel somewhat uncomfortable right now. Even if this was only in game, as a spy, one should still have trouble calling themselves the police righteously. The guilt of betraying those around them would weigh heavily upon their hearts no matter what, so all the spies had excellent mental strength. The guy in front of him was undoubtedly the best candidate for a spy there was. He was perfectly at ease even when he was directly exposed in front of his own guild leader. Although the transition finished quickly, when Wei Chen and his people backed down, they still looked very anxious, as if the players from Blue Brook and Samsara would turn and kill them right away to vent their anger. To Changing Spring, the sight was funny and annoying. For competitions in an online game, killing and fighting was a rather ineffective method. If a battle could actually resolve all the future threat the group in front of him posed, Changing Spring would start a world war without any hesitation. Regrettably, even if he were to beat them here, what could he possibly achieve? If it was a war fought between the big guilds, then victory would win glory for his own guild. On the other hand, killing this group of nobodies would only tarnish his guild's name. Being one of the top elites in the game for so long, Changing Spring had long since passed the stage where he still needed to PK to vent his anger. Yet people were still weary of him for these kinds of trivial matters. It only made Changing Spring feel that this group's character was particularly low. "What? Aren't you people going to try to fight us?" Wei Chen exclaimed in surprise when he realized that neither Blue Brook nor Samsara planned on doing anything to him or his group. They had left the battle zone perfectly unscathed. "Is there such a need?" Changing Spring retorted flatly. "This is an online game. Scores ought to be settled quickly and directly. Even after such a great loss, instead of fighting it out, you people are still scheming around. What a killjoy! The way you people play is so boring," Wei Chen lamented. Wei Chen's words made Changing Spring fall into a long silence. At last, Changing Spring admitted, "What you say is not entirely false, but we were never here to play in the first place." "Haha, apparently you're quite smart. No wonder you're the guild leader of Blue Brook, Wei Chen praised. Ha ha, I'll remember you. Changing Spring didn't join the battle himself. His view was pointed at the other party the whole time. That's a must. If possible, I hope you won't kick me out of your guild, though, Wei Chen replied. Why? Changing Spring asked. Because Blue Brook's benefits are really good and its fame is also quite useful, Wei Chen answered. Changing Spring was speechless. He was fully expecting some spectacular reasoning, but all he got was this kind of honesty instead. Thus, when he was moving his view, he kicked those in Blue Brook all out decisively. FK, shameless. With such a big guild, do you honestly need to empty up a few slots that badly? Wei Chen swore as he drifted away with the group. Finally, they all disappeared into the swamp. Let me see what goodies you've got. Shortly after they left, Wei Chen was asking Ye Xiu impatiently, drooling in anticipation. Here. Ye Xiu sent an exchange request over and gave Wei Chen the materials he got from the two guild leaders. This is it. Why didn't you use the list I sent you? Wei Chen was unexpectedly disgruntled with the results, but these were all that the guild leaders could manage with great difficulty. Get some standards, why don't you? Is it even possible for them to accept your list? Ye Xiu scolded. Under that kind of conditions, it was worth a try. Wei Chen refuted. And this is the result of your attempt, Ye Xiu replied. It's so-so, but it's still better than what you would have gotten before. Weakling, Wei Chen argued. That's because I'm not as shameless as you are, Ye Xiu retorted. This is completely shameless. If I had more people, I would have planned an ambush on the way here and kill their delivery person. That would have been spectacular. Could they count that loss on me? Wei Chen proposed. No human can stop you now. Ye Xiu took a deep breath and lamented. Enough already. Give Death Hand back to me. I'm going to upgrade it. Wei Chen changed the subject. Are you sure you won't destroy it? Ye Xiu asked. FCK off, stop cursing me, Wei Chen yelled back. You're not confident, Ye Xiu concluded. Based on my years of research, I think it should be fine, Wei Chen answered. Clearly, you've never tried, Ye Xiu pointed out, but I have experience, Wei Chen insisted. The experience of an antique. FCK off, I'm not going to argue with you. Hurry up and give Death Hand back to me. Let me upgrade the weapon first. We have to work for the material needed for the next upgrade anyways. I don't know if we'll be lucky enough to find another boss. Wei Chen sighed. That's going to be hard. With all the hidden rules in the game, we're no better than the big shots from the big guilds. Truthfully speaking, they didn't pay much attention to us before. They thought that the heavenly domain wasn't like the normal servers. They believe that they have more power here, and we are just a tiny group with no real power, but after this, they will probably start to see us as a threat towards their bosses. If they actually spend some effort on making things difficult for us, we might actually suffer a lot from it. Ye Xiu explained. True. After all, bosses are different. Just killing one takes a lot of time. Hijacking a boss is more troublesome than hijacking a guild leader. Wei Chen agreed. Actually, killing guild leaders would be nice too, but the problem is that guild leaders only drop equipment, not materials. Ye Xiu lamented. AI, if only we know who got the material every time they killed a boss, then that would be great. We wouldn't have to kill the bosses anymore. We just need to kill that player. Wei Chen added. That would still be difficult. Killing the person won't give you the right thing every time. Ye Xiu commented. If killing them doesn't drop it, then we'll just keep on killing, Wei Chen answered. Should we try it next time? Ye Xiu offered. But we need to find out who picked up the material. That's too hard, Wei Chen sighed. We just need a spy among the higher-ups. Ye Xiu spoke. The two turned around and looked at the same time then. Wei Chen's friend stood behind his windward formation. By now, almost all of their guild titles had disappeared. It was not because they were hiding them, but because they got kicked out. There were a few exceptions, though. They were in Excellent Dynasty or Samsara. None of Wei Chen's players from these two guilds had joined the fight, so the spies in these two guilds weren't exposed. We're probably on their blacklist now. This is problematic, Wei Chen frowned. It shouldn't be too much of a problem, you can just switch accounts. I checked. Luckily in your group everyone has a different class, right? Well, it just happens so that I have a bunch of level 70 empty accounts. I can give those accounts to your people. You can then transfer over your equipment, then that should settle it. Ye Xiu offered. FCK, do you know that our accounts all have really high amounts of skill points? Wei Chen complained. Really? How high? About 4,700, Wei Chen answered. Why is it so high? Ye Xiu exclaimed. With the regular leveling and main quests, a character would always end up with exactly 4,000 skill points. The additional skill points were gained under random conditions from skill books, hidden quests, and event rewards. Glory had a long history. Ye Xiu wouldn't be surprised to see some regular characters in the game actually had an amount of skill points comparable to the godly characters. After all, this kind of thing depended solely on luck. However, those around Wei Chen all had around 4,700 skill points. Now that was shocking. This was all the result of good luck. Such good fortune for all 20 or so. Clearly, this was no longer the result of luck. There must have been some skill involved in it. Hee, this is my guarded secret, Wei Chen boasted. Nonsense. More than 20 people already know this. How can you call that a guarded secret? Ye Xiu snapped. Speaking about it, skill points had been a headache for Ye Xiu. This was something that could only rely on luck. No one could guarantee how a character would end up. The only solution to this problem was money. On top of that, money couldn't actually buy skill points. It could only be used to buy the accounts with really high skill points. Some would say, all problems that could be solved with money are not problems. Clearly, those who say that are all rich people. For those who use money to build teams, this is truly not too big of an issue. Even though there are very few accounts with such high skill points, Glory had been established for a long time and it had a large population of players. There are still a decent number of accounts with high skill points. Still, to Ye Xiu, who was starting over with nothing in hand, this was a very grave issue. The price for accounts with high skill points could be as high as the price of a silver-class weapons. Let alone a full team of them, Ye Xiu couldn't afford a single one. Who would have thought that Wei Chen, who was right in front of him, would have a way to stack skill points? This would not only solve an urgent problem for Ye Xiu, but it would also bring a large amount of fortune to him. In that moment, Ye Xiu only had one wish. Let's hope this shameless guy isn't bragging, or that the guarded secret is as worthless as I bought them. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 542 Chapter 542 Follow-up. Ha ha ha, you want to know. Let this senior think of something for you to do and then I'll consider telling you. Wei Chen raised his eyebrows. Old thing who has your death hand. Ye Xiu laughed grimly. FCK. Wei Chen realized that he had been too pleased with himself and had forgotten something so important. You win. Wei Chen clearly valued his silver weapon. His years of hard work couldn't be faked. Hurry up and tell me. You should know. In Glory, when certain conditions are met, some items can be dropped 100% of the time, Wei Chen said. As an experienced expert, Ye Xiu understood what Wei Chen meant. You're saying kill books can also be dropped in a similar way. Yes, but it's still not guaranteed. At best, it can increase the drop chance. Wei Chen answered. Big brother, isn't that just a myth? Ye Xiu felt a bit confused. Time range, fixed input sequence, fixed kill order, etc. These weren't proven facts in Glory, but rather beliefs of some players. These illogical methods were hard to believe. On the other hand, setting up certain conditions to hit out equipment had a 100% chance and could be proven through testing. All of these methods made sense too. For example, when Ye Xiu first started playing the game from scratch, the method to guarantee the hidden boss, ornamental sword in the beginner village, was to repeatedly hit the sword's belt. This could be explained through logic. If the sword belt broke, the sword would drop. A lot of these types of methods existed in Glory. However, Wei Chen's method only increased the drop chance. In an instant, his method felt somewhat implausible. How could you know whether the drop chance actually increased or not? A 5% drop rate didn't mean that you would be guaranteed 5 drops out of 100 kills. Each drop was an independent event after all. Out of 1,000 times, you might not get any drops in 950 kills, but you could get 50 drops in the last 50 kills, and it would still be considered a 5% drop rate. As a result, for drop rates, apart from 100% or 0%, it was difficult to estimate an exact number. Wei Chen only mentioned increasing the drop chance. His method seemed more like a myth than a fact. Myth, don't all of these characters with around 4,700 skill points prove that it's not a myth? Wei Chen refuted. Then tell me, how do you do it? Ye Xiu asked. Okay, we have to start with the relationship between people and glory. Death hand. Ye Xiu spoke bluntly. DM mit. Wei Chen grit his teeth. Hurry up and tell me. Ye Xiu held a stick and he didn't have the patience to wait. There's a lot of stuff. I'll just send you a doc. Wei Chen didn't continue stalling. He knew that what he had was very important. If the two of them were going to create a team with the goal of becoming champions, then just having outstanding players wasn't enough. The characters had to be strong enough too. Okay, send it to me. I'll study it, Ye Xiu said. You don't trust this brother's research. You haven't touched the game very much in these past few years. Glory is an online game after all. You can still learn a lot from the web. The training methods used by teams are becoming more and more mature, but they're also moving farther and farther away from the game. That's not good. Wei Chen spoke his thoughts. It sounds like you've discovered a lot in these past few years, Ye Xiu asked. I have. Definitely things that you guys in the pro scene probably wouldn't know, Wei Chen said confidently. So thank me for giving you a chance to go back on stage, Ye Xiu said. Wei Chen went silent for a long time but then said, FCK off, hurry up and give me my death hand back. It's in the city storage, I'll go grab it, Ye Xiu said. Wait, something doesn't feel right up ahead. Just as they were about to leave Poison Fang Swamp, Windward Formation suddenly stopped to hear for any sounds of movement. Yeah, something feels off, Ye Xiu said. The two experienced players could tell the situation wasn't normal. It's probably those guilds from before. They probably left some people behind to see what we're up to, Wei Chen guessed. It looks like there are quite a lot of people. Ye Xiu looked around. These people hadn't exposed themselves yet, but they weren't making too much of an effort to stay hidden either. They had clearly completed an encirclement ready to pounce at any time. It seems like breaking out will be a bit difficult, Wei Chen said. I agree. You go first, Wei Chen said. Of course. Ye Xiu logged off. FCK, can't you say something nice? Wei Chen cursed in QQ. Do we still need to play tricks with each other? We all know it's true, so why waste time? Ye Xiu asked. UFC Kerr, you said you'd give us accounts. Was that for real? Wei Chen asked. Of course. You still have time to chat, Ye Xiu asked back. The enemies aren't moving. I'm not moving. It's not like we need these accounts anymore. In a bit, this senior is going to fight with them and give them a taste of my amazingness, Wei Chen said. Seeing that I've logged off, that attack must have hurt them greatly. Ye Xiu said, don't be so happy, they might wait there until you log back on, Wei Chen warned. I doubt they'll spend all day waiting for me with so many people. Come rescue me when there are less people, Ye Xiu said. Why should I rescue you? Wei Chen said. Ye Xiu replied with 2 words, death hand. God DM it. This time when you get out, you're going to return my death hand immediately. If you don't return it, I won't agree to anything you say ever again. I can't wait another minute, Wei Chen cursed. Hurry up and go fight them, Ye Xiu said. Wait for my message, Wei Chen replied. In Poison Fang Swamp, the battle began. With Windward Formation at the head, a bunch of half-naked characters charged in a direction. After being kicked out of the guild, they were left half-naked. Half of their equipment had been taken back by the guild storage. Against these half-naked savages, the guilds calmly concentrated their firepower to kill them immediately. Who would have thought that this charge would be a fake? The instant the encirclement attacked, the two teams suddenly changed directions and started attacking in a frenzy. At this moment, the encirclement had already let out their attacks and couldn't take them back. Pooh! It was like a sword hitting a crucial point. However, the sword was too blunt and couldn't kill. It was still enough to injure, though. On the other hand, these two teams attacked the encirclement and killed several people. "Pick up their equipment," Wei Chen shouted. There wasn't many equipment on the ground. With 20 half-naked people scrambling for them, it seemed very uncivilized. Their scramble made the players making up the encirclement stare dumbly at them. They were all from big guilds and had discipline. It was hard for them to look at such shameless acts. During this period of disdain, all of the equipment laying on the ground had been swept clean. Wei Chen shouted again, and the two teams separated, with one on the left and the other on the right. Each team forced their way into one part of the encirclement. This time, the guild players fought back. They wouldn't let these savages pick up their items so easily. Their counterattack killed off several of them. This was a team battle. With a multitude of attacks coming at once, life and death was only a matter of seconds. Ye Xiu wouldn't be able to remain in this type of battle. A level 54 character had limited strength. The battle that took place in Poison Fang Swamp didn't last long. It ended within minutes. All 20 players died. These players had been cursing the entire time, and in a very ugly manner too. Their shouts often had to do with the reproductive system, but from their angry curses, they could also feel that they were happy and having fun. The enemies had finally been killed, but the guild players didn't feel happy at all. The enemies that they had killed didn't bear any resentment towards their killers, only pure passion for fighting. Right before they died, they often said things like, "You're washed clean now. Wait for Big Daddy to come for you." It made all of the guild players feel like they had been ridiculed. They looked at each other and couldn't find anything to be pleased about. At this moment, a system announcement came. Samsara had killed Swamp Hunter Lepu. What's this? When the guild leaders saw this message, their minds suddenly went blank. Hadn't Swamp Hunter Lepu been snatched away by Lord Grimm's gang? They even killed off a bunch of guys at Poison Fang Swamp's exit. Even though it was too bad that they weren't able to catch Lord Grimm, it was still a small win in their eyes. However, how come Samsara killed Swamp Hunter Lepu? They hadn't come to their senses yet when a follow-up to the proof post in the Glory forums. The follow-up spoke of two things. One, ridiculing Blue Brook Guild had been a misunderstanding. In reality, this had all been done by the pest Lord Grimm. After learning the truth, Blue Brook Guild helped Samsara take the boss, and in accordance to the proof post, the boss was given to Samsara. 2. Samsara was the main topic. Even if they weren't going to fight for the boss, they had to fight for justice. Blue Brook Guild had proved everything was a misunderstanding, but in this type of situation, Samsara wouldn't cower. Excellent Dynasty wanted to enter by exploiting their weakness. Fine, Samsara would fight. Samsara wouldn't compromise for any reason. No matter the predicament, if they were going to kill, they would slaughter their way to the heavens. They would kill for justice. These two had videos and images as proof. Samsara's players stood up straight with pride as they watched Excellent Dynasty's players stoop down to pick up equipment and leave. All of it had been recorded. "Didn't you say you couldn't understand this time's deal? Do you understand now?" Ye Xiu said to Chen Guo. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 543 Chapter 543 Spies. Chen Guo looked a bit dumbstruck. She didn't understand it too thoroughly, but after seeing the two follow-up posts, she got a clearer idea of the whole picture. Bluebrook Guild's action had been forced. With the proof post, even if the guilds knew that Bluebrook Guild hadn't done it intentionally, without any concrete proof to back up their uninvolvement, they didn't mind putting the blame on Bluebrook Guild. This type of attack was much more valuable than a PvP match in the game. Bluebrook Guild had a club and a team behind them. Such an existence made up of 3 entities would be extremely difficult to harm through just PvP alone. On the other hand, revealing a scandal could weaken the popularity of one of these 3 entities and could be considered quite a heavy blow to their reputation. Bluebrook Guild clearly understood this point. As a result, they cleaned themselves of the matter, refusing to let the other guilds use this opportunity to attack them. Bluebrook Guild didn't have much of a choice. As for Samsara, Chen Guo saw the chain of shouting and cheering from Samsara fans underneath the post. There were quite a lot of other players praising the manliness of Samsara's actions too. She quickly realized the significance of the actions that Samsara had taken. When normal players played the game, they didn't care about the businesses of these club guilds. Today, Samsara had been cheated and used this to attract the sympathy of others. Afterwards, they used a battle to show their might. Other guilds might look at such actions with disgust, but it resonated well with the vast majority. People played the game to have fun. If they were cheated, they didn't want to go through some lengthy process in order to get revenge. They would rather take revenge immediately. Whether or not revenge was the answer was a completely different matter. Samsara went with what the people liked. Not only did they rally their own supporters, many neutral players had a deeper impression of Samsara now, especially with Samsara taking the boss. This was a perfect example of a main character taking action to achieve his goals. In the eyes of the people, the only word that could describe this was cool. However, after looking at it again, she suddenly felt a bit confused about one part. If that's the case, Bluebrook Guild needed Samsara as witnesses to clear their name, but Samsara didn't need Bluebrook Guild to do anything for them. If Bluebrook Guild was still the betrayer, then even if Samsara won the boss in the end, Samsara would look more powerful, right? Not bad, not bad. You must have improved a lot to think of this outcome, Ye Xiu praised. Chen Guo rolled her eyes. She clearly didn't feel very accepting of his praise. Truthfully, she didn't have much interest in how the guilds operated. She preferred watching sick plays, killing in a single combo, etc. Samsara obviously doesn't want to be linked with Bluebrook Guild, but if their intents were seen through by Bluebrook Guild, then there's nothing they can really do about it. Bluebrook Guild refuses to part with them, and they couldn't take the boss, so to make a trade-off, they helped to clear Bluebrook Guild's name. Ye Xiu explained. You saw that the 2 parties urgently needed the boss, so you struck a deal with them, Chen Guo asked. Ye Xiu laughed bitterly. I had no choice. In our current situation, trying to compete with these guilds fairly is like asking a tiger for its skin. I don't have the time to slowly make business with them, which is why I have to resort to such shameless methods like this. You don't need to explain. I'm not looking down on you for doing it. Keep up the good work, Chen Guo said. With such a shameless guy like Old Wei to help me, it's like adding wings to a tiger, Ye Xiu sighed. It's not like you're very merciful either, Chen Guo said. Don't say such nonsense. I'm nowhere near Old Wei's level of shamelessness. Ye Xiu spoke solemnly. Chen Guo commented, You're really modest when it comes to stuff like this. On QQ, Wei Chen reported the death of his gang. All of these characters had to be abandoned, so he decided that they would look around and kill these guild players, so these abandoned accounts would gain some value. See, look how shameless he is, Ye Xiu said to Chen Guo, while asking Wei Chen how he should send over the open accounts. How are we going to develop after this? Wei Chen was currently leading his team all over the place to attack the guild players. He was having quite a good time, playing while chatting with Ye Xiu on QQ. I have a big plan. Ye Xiu said. What big plan? Wei Chen said. I've decided to send you out as a spy, Ye Xiu answered. I can't though. No, if I were to become a spy, wouldn't you be wasting my talents? Wei Chen objected. No, for such an unscrupulous guy like yourself, using you as a spy puts your talents to full use. Ye Xiu honestly replied. Wouldn't you be a better fit then? Wei Chen said. My schemes and foresight aren't nearly as deep as yours. Ye Xiu politely refuted. No, no. I'm older than you in age, but in terms of knowledge and glory, you will always be the superstar of experience and shamelessness. Even after you retired, you've deeply affected the later generation. You're not like me who stayed silent for all these years. Even Blue Brook Guild's dog of a leader didn't recognize this senior. Did Blue Rain not hang up a huge portrait of me in the Hall of Fame for those dogs to worship me? I'm to blame for that. If it weren't for me, you might have actually been able to win some fame during the 2 years and earned yourself a portrait in the Hall of Fame. But as the founder of Team Blue Rain, I believe your hard work and passion set the team's path for the future by becoming the powerful stepping stone for the later generation. One shouldn't be too unduly humble. Are you seeking illiterate? When was this senior ever too unduly humble? Flip open the Baidu dictionary and study how to use proverbs properly. Don't speak such nonsense to me. If you aren't too humble, then you'll just have to accept your job as a spy. Trust me, you have the ability to do the job well, Ye Xiu said. What a load of SHT. This senior is saying this job is too easy for someone like myself. Stop pestering me, Wei Chen expressed. Obviously for a job as a normal spy, but this time I'm going to be doing something big, Ye Xiu said. How big? What's the point of having 1 or 2 spies? If we're sending in spies, we're going to send in a full group of them, Ye Xiu said. Why? Look, with your skill, as long as you don't intentionally keep a low profile, even if you won't be able to become one of the core members that manage the guild, becoming a core member that leads teams shouldn't be a problem, right? When this happens, you can add your gang into the guild and we'll set up a group of spies in the guild. A single spy won't be able to get much information, but a guild's elite team should be able to access quite a lot of information, right? Ye Xiu said. You really are too shameless. Not only do you want me to jump into a pit of fire, you even want all of my bros to jump in with me. How can say it's a pit of fire? Do you know the benefits of being in a guild? Ye Xiu said. That's true. Without the extra stats and equipment from a large guild, our strength is too weak. It doesn't feel good. It seems like taking advantage of these benefits is not a bad idea. Yeah, it's like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Okay, I'll do it. When will those account cards arrive? That depends on the delivery worker. Okay, when I get the account cards, I'll start. Do you have any recommendation as to which guild I should join? Which guild do you think would be the best? With this brother's skill, it doesn't matter. The guilds will be lining up to invite me. There's no need to consider whether or not I can do it. Then you decide. What about Samsara? Seeing today's actions, Samsara has quite the ambition. The guild wants to become more popular and they've been doing well in the competitive scene recently too. Samsara's actions this time might even have been orders from above. They want the attention in game to coincide with their rise to the pro stage. Wei Chen said. It's a good choice. With greater ambition, there are more opportunities to join and develop. Samsara is not bad. I approve, Ye Xiu said. Be starred, it sounds like you're approving my decision. This senior makes his own decisions, Wei Chen replied. This is the last time I'm going to remind you, Death Hand is still with me, Ye Xiu replied. Right, don't you think that Samsara has a good chance of winning this season? Wei Chen quickly switched topics. Their momentum is strong and they clearly aspire to be champions. This year, they even got to host the All-Stars. They clearly plan on cementing their position in the pro scene this year. If you're talking about chances, all of the strong teams have a chance, but if you're talking about readiness and conviction, Samsara is looking quite strong. Speaking of which, Samsara didn't seem to be looking too strong for the first half of the split, Wei Chen said. That's part of their readiness. It's not easy starting off strong and keeping it up for the entire season. It's better to start slower, grow, and then burst forth at the end for the playoffs, Ye Xiu said. So what you're saying is that you think Samsara's going to win? Yes, Ye Xiu replied. Then should I put some money on it? Wei Chen said. What are you talking about? Over here, our underground gambling den has opened a spot for glory. I was planning on placing bets for who would win the playoffs, but I wasn't sure who to place bets on, Wei Chen explained. Chen Guo's back was sweating seeing these two talk trash to each other, while discussing their shameless plan to send a group of spies into another guild. When she suddenly saw the two chatting about the playoffs and how Ye Xiu predicted Samsara to win. Do you really think Samsara will win? If I were the one running the underground gambling den, I would definitely set Samsara's betting odds low. Ye Xiu pointed to the screen. The King's Avatar Volume 5 Ace Showdown Chapter 544. Chapter 544. Third follow-up. Blue Brook Guild had kept their name pristine. Samsara had gained more momentum. Overall, Samsara had benefited the most from this transaction. Blue Brook Guild could only preserve their current popularity, allowing their guild members know just how much they had suffered under Lord Grimm, and his group's hand. Samsara's move had greatly increased their popularity, especially since the club also made a statement in an interview about the battle spirit team Samsara had. Even though the club never referred to the game, anyone would be able to piece the two together. The club mostly talked about the performance of the team during the current season. Samsara's recent achievements formed a backdrop which proved their spirit. Both the guild and club had made progress together and immediately garnered a great amount of attention. Many people began considering the probability of Samsara winning the championships this season. At this moment, no one would have thought that after these two follow-ups came out, that a third follow-up would appear. The main topic of the post: who gave you the power to put the boss at stake? The original poster heavily criticized the 8 guilds and their competition that staked the boss as the reward. The poster's reasoning was very simple. The boss didn't belong to the guilds. In theory, the boss belonged to all the players of glory. Why did the guilds get to take the boss as their own and fight against each other with the boss as the reward? This post gave rise to a huge amount of commotion. It didn't matter whether the player was a fan or a supporter. Everyone hoped to have the chance to kill this type of boss and obtain its potential drops. However, wild bosses weren't beings that could be killed by just anyone. Slightly weaker teams could even die against one. As a result, only the elite guild teams could successfully kill wild bosses with a high success rate. Club guilds were undoubtedly amongst the top among guilds and also valued wild bosses highly. Over the years, the wild bosses almost always fell into the hands of these club guilds. In reality, the club guilds already considered wild bosses as theirs. As soon as this post came out, controversy erupted. The reasoning was specious, though. The club guilds had never declared that these bosses belonged to them alone. The boss belonged to whoever killed it. They had to care about their own images. If other players came to fight for the boss, they would kill the players or win the boss with higher contribution. In any case, if other came to stop them, they would fight back. They treated everyone equally when it came to wild bosses. Bosses belonged to all the players of glory. Because of this, club guilds obviously had the right to kill bosses as well. Club guilds killed the bosses according to glory's rules. If someone else stole the boss away from them, they wouldn't immediately attack and take revenge. The proof post hadn't been well written. It ignored the feelings of many players. The guilds felt that it was completely natural. The players thought so too, which was why no one had said anything about it until now. However, now that someone with a different perspective had come out, it immediately raised a lot of controversy. The club guild players naturally supported their own guilds. However, many players criticized the guilds' inconsiderate conduct towards them. This post was much more shocking than Blue Brook Guilds or Samsara's follow-ups. This time, it not only struck a blow towards the 8 guilds involved, but also to all of the club guilds. The post also denounced how the club guilds only cared about the interests of their pro teams and restricted the freedom of their own players, treating them like slaves. This denunciation was a harsh statement. In response, the big guilds frantically defended themselves, talking about the benefits of being in a large guild. While defending themselves, they conducted an investigation on the original poster. They obviously wanted to know if this attack had been done by someone with other motives. Speaking of which, everyone had already begun suspecting a certain player. But after conducting their investigation, the poster hadn't hidden his history. He wasn't anyone particularly famous. Traces of him could be found all over the forums. It seemed like he was the type of player who liked to spread rumors. The big guilds didn't dare to relax their guards, though. If it was just some random player talking trash, then they wouldn't be afraid at all, but if this player had other motives, they had to be ready to respond. Let alone the big guilds, even Chen Guo began to suspect a certain someone after seeing the ruckus caused by the post. "Is this your doing?" Chen Guo pointed at the screen and asked Ye Xiu. Then again, she had not seen Ye Xiu typing up anything like this earlier. Ye Xiu took a quick look and shook his head. "No, Tusk, the guilds are going crazy over this. Look." Chen Guo went back to the forum home page for Ye Xiu to see. The main page was filled with statements from the big guilds, defending themselves from the criticism they had just been plastered with, especially the part about treating their guild members as slaves. They had to give an explanation. Tusk. Ye Xiu sighed, but didn't pay too much attention to it and continued to do his own work. He hadn't played much of the game in these last 2 days. Instead, he studied the document from Wei Chen on the fastest way to gather skill points. In this document, Wei Chen listed a huge amount of quests and explained the requirements of these quests in order to get an increased drop rate for skill books. With Ye Xiu's knowledge of the game, he didn't need to do much testing to test the hypothesis in order to figure out the method's reliability. In the end, he had to admit that Wei Chen's research couldn't be considered a myth. The only thing he lacked was hard data that he himself had collected. In Wei Chen's research, he called all of these hidden conditions. The reason he was so confident was because glory didn't seem to be lacking in these types of hidden conditions. For example, the vast majority of skills had hidden effects that could be activated upon certain situations playing out. Because players used these skills so often, these hidden effects were eventually figured out. In that case, what other hidden conditions existed in glory? This was one reason for Wei Chen's efforts in researching how to increase the drop rate of skill books. Of course, Wei Chen also considered this as a method of becoming rich. The two had discussed this when discussing the contents of the document. "I've finished looking at the document you sent me." Ye Xiu hadn't played the game for the last 2 days and had spent all his time studying the document. "What do you think? It's pretty sound, right?" Wei Chen replied on QQ. "Yeah, amazing." Ye Xiu praised sincerely because he knew just how difficult it must have been to research all of this. Wei Chen had studied quests. He had searched through the forums and heard from rumors about the different places and quests with a chance of dropping skill books. Through these quests, he found the hidden conditions necessary to increase the drop rate of said skill books. Apart from daily quests, most quests couldn't be repeated. Non-repeatable quests made up most of the results from Wei Chen's research. What did this mean? It meant that Wei Chen had used numerous accounts in order to test his theory because each account could only try each quest once. Ye Xiu didn't ask how Wei Chen had gotten all those accounts, but he could imagine how difficult it must have been. It wasn't possible for Ye Xiu to not respect such effort. "Once our team starts using it, make sure it doesn't leak out," Wei Chen carefully warned. "Of course," Ye Xiu said. Come take a look at all the loot we got, Wei Chen said, and sent Ye Xiu screenshots of their regained equipment one after the other. With his gang of bros, Wei Chen wandered around the heavenly domain ambushing guild players. They didn't say a word to them and just killed them directly. This type of harassment wouldn't hurt the big guilds much, but they couldn't let it slide either. The guilds formed a hunting team in order to hunt down Wei Chen and his gang. Wei Chen happily clashed with them, sacrificing their accounts while continuing to fill up their inventories. After 2 days, the stats of their 20 accounts were completely red. Their experience points were negative numbers. They were too lazy to count how many times they had died because they were more interested in the equipment they received during this period. As they died, their strength declined, making it more and more difficult to continue fighting. Even so, they still continued to bite at these guild players. The guilds were completely sick of them, but they learned from their previous mistake. This time, they didn't dare to release a bounty. Wei Chen's gang was with Lord Grimm. If they offered a reward, what would they do if these guys just killed themselves for the reward? Okay, save some strength to help me escape, Ye Xiu said. The guilds weren't having a good time these last 2 days. Let alone the boss, the proof post was also very troublesome to deal with. A random team was ambushing their players every day. In addition to this, they had a group of players guarding Lord Grimm's log-off spot 24/7, but they had yet to see Lord Grimm log on. This time, they were determined to fight with Ye Xiu, though. They had the manpower anyways. If they just made the shifts shorter, no one would be as bitter about it. Whoever killed Lord Grimm would get a large reward, so the guild players had fairly high morale. Yeah, it's about time. We should hurry and get you out while our accounts still have enough strength to. If we're going to be spies, we can't get revealed yet. Wei Chen also replied. Yeah, I'll get an account too and help you guys, Ye Xiu said. He asked Chen Guo to borrow her chasing haze. After logging into the game, he headed towards Poison Fang Swamp, where Lord Grimm had logged off at the King's Avatar Chapter 545. Chapter 545. Rescue. The 8 guilds involved in the proof post were gathered at the boundaries of Poison Fang Swamp. Initially, only 5 of the guilds had hidden themselves to lie in wait for an ambush, but later, they invited the other 3 guilds to join in. Blue Brook Guild and Samsara had just been extorted by Ye Xiu, so they happily accepted. Excellent Dynasty naturally accepted too. The guilds arranged the shifts for guarding this area. The method was a bit clumsy, but it was still better than nothing. Against a cunning god-level opponent, having an opportunity to kill him once was hard to come by. Yes, the 8 guilds just wanted to kill him once in order to vent their anger, but how would they have known that he wouldn't appear for 2 days? It was quite surprising to them. Lord Grimm won't log on. If this was permanent, it would be incredible news, but then again, how could it be possible? Of course it couldn't be. If he wasn't logging on, was he perhaps plotting something scary? The guilds thought of the little nincompoop complaining on the forums, and suspected that it must have been the work of Lord Grimm. For a moment, they didn't know if it was better for Lord Grimm to be online or not. In any case, they had to hastily explain themselves on the forums and stay in position at Poison Fang Swamp. As for the reward they would receive for killing Lord Grimm, it had already been put up inside the guilds and would never been taken down. Why else had Wei Chen attacked Ye Xiu with his identity as a member of the Blue Brook Guild? Overall, the deployment of the guilds was a bit sloppy. It wasn't a very careful formation, but rather more like a desperate action. But in any case, their superiors hadn't given them any new instructions, so the guild members simply followed orders and changed shifts constantly. Each of the 8 guilds sent a team of players for a total of 80 players. For convenience, they formed a group. As a result, the teams who arrived to take over the new shift would enter the group and then stare blankly into empty space. This sequence hadn't changed at all for the past 2 days. The players on shift weren't too bored, though. The guilds had a lot of players. They just needed to randomly switch a few of them out every once in a while. No one would feel like the task was too repetitive. The only thing that repeated was Lord Grim never showing up. At this moment, a team from Misty Castle arrived, ready to take over the new shift. The 8 guilds switched shifts at different times to avoid everyone coming at once and making the situation chaotic. "Are you guys here?" "Yeah, we're here." "Has Lord Grim logged in yet?" "No." Whenever new players arrived on shift, they would often have a similar conversation. After some dialogue, the new team entered the group and the old team left. At this moment, 20 players lay in wait, secretly observing the situation. Wei Chen had already investigated this change of shift already. It wasn't any different than before. The enemy is quite fierce. By changing shifts at different times, we won't only be facing these 80 players, there's always backup on their way, Wei Chen said to Ye Xiu. Is there always one team coming to change shifts every time? Ye Xiu asked. Yeah, from what I saw this time and last time, this seems to be true, Wei Chen said. Then why don't we attack this team? Ye Xiu asked. I thought of it, but from the main city to here the space is very open. There isn't any place to ambush them from. We'll catch wind of each other way before we can get close, Wei Chen said. Ye Xiu thought of the terrain and agreed. Afterwards he said, then what about in the main city? It's a level 65 city and it's quite populated too. It would be best if we didn't go to a place with too many people. Wei Chen sighed. His team had gone to a city to repair their equipment, but the guilds somehow surrounded and massacred them. It had been a miserable day. So the only choice is to break through these 80 players, Ye Xiu asked. It seems like it. Then let's do it, Ye Xiu said. That's what I was going to do, but then you started spewing all that bullshit, Wei Chen cursed. Let's go from the 6 o'clock direction, Ye Xiu suggested. Why 6 o'clock? Go from the 12 o'clock. We'll create a small hole. Then you log on and run deep into the map. As long as you pull some distance from them, how could you not shrug them off with your strict control over your stamina? Wei Chen said. Old bro, I'm only level 54. I can't even use insect repellent smoke. Running deeper into the swamp isn't convenient for me. It would be better to run down the main street. Oh, I forgot about that. Wei Chen immediately realized. It wasn't that he lacked experience. There hadn't ever been a level 54 character in the heavenly domain, so players over here wouldn't consider things from that sort of perspective. Let's go then. Wei Chen led his team and changed directions. Don't be in such a rush. Let me cause a small disturbance first. Ye Xiu was using chasing haze. Launchers had the longest range of the classes in Glory, so he dared to provoke these 80 players. Hurry up, Wei Chen impatiently urged. As soon as he said this, Ye Xiu's chasing haze threw out a lighter, low and level. However, in the dark Poison Fang swamp, the light attracted everyone's attention. Who is it? A player on guard noticed the light, but with how Ye Xiu threw the lighter didn't travel far, so it had already landed on the ground by the time the player noticed it. The player could only see light and couldn't tell what it was. What's wrong? The unaware players asked, when suddenly they heard a loud bang and saw several heat-seeking missiles flying towards them. FCK, it's an attack from above, someone shouted. Everyone began to move. The heat-seeking missiles would fly towards wherever the lighter had hit the ground. They hadn't seen the lighter, so they didn't know where to run. No one move. The person who saw the light realized that the light was the guiding beacon for the heat-seeking missiles. He didn't have time to think where the lighter had come from. He only knew that if no one moved, everyone would be safe. However, at this moment, the one thing that couldn't be shouted was, no one move. Even something like telling everyone to move in a single direction would have been more believable. The shout aroused everyone's suspicion, especially because not everyone here was from the same guild. No one really trusted each other. Thus, it would have been better if he hadn't shouted anything at all. The shout made all of the guild teams run around like crazy. 3 players pounced directly towards the heat-seeking missile's landing spot. Not my fault. The player saw that no one was listening and actually felt happy seeing 3 players running towards the missiles. Bang! By the time the 3 had noticed that they really shouldn't have moved, the missiles had already reached them. A mushroom cloud popped up and the 3 went tumbling away. 1 player fell on a dried-up tree and couldn't get down. Team 1, Team 2, go take a look over there. Someone spoke. This time in this joint movement there was an overall leader. Whoever was the group leader could speak. Because they changed shifts frequently, every guild had a chance to lead the group, so no guild would feel that the system was unfair, so there was no point arguing over it. Team 1's captain was the group leader. He gave the orders to personally check and also brought along Team 2. The 2 teams hastily ran over with their weapons clanking. When they arrived, the mushroom cloud had yet to disperse. Suddenly, a beam of light descended from the skies, and because of the mushroom cloud covering it, no one noticed it. This attack was very brave. People had to immediately rush over for the mushroom cloud to cover it, otherwise No would have gotten hit by the light beam and the attack would have been wasted. But now, satellite beam descended from the skies. The ones in front bore the brunt of the attack. The other players quickly got out of the way in fright. But then, the satellite beam split into multiple smaller pillars which were controlled manually. The pillars didn't follow the set pattern and predicted the directions which the players would dodge towards. Team 3, perform a flank. Everyone else, search the surroundings, the group leader hastily ordered. The 8 guilds dispersed like water. Wei Chen didn't need Ye Xiu to remind him. He could easily tell that it was a perfect opportunity to act. The enemies scrambled to figure out the situation, which gave them an opportunity to directly cut through them. Everyone ready, Wei Chen typed in the group chat. His gaze was locked onto the numerous players that were heading in his direction. Pop out and kill them all for me, Wei Chen shouted. 1, 2, 3. There are people here. When Wei Chen finished counting to 3, the other side noticed half of Windward Formation's head sticking out from behind a tree. The distance between the 2 sides was too close to escape. Wei Chen couldn't hide any longer, but he timed it perfectly. After counting to 3, he shouted a single word: attack. 20 players leapt out of their hiding spots and used their strongest moves. All of them were cursing at the same time too, saying things like FCKU for 10,000 years. One wave of Aya. Even though Wei Chen's group no longer had the same strength as other level 70 characters, their attacks combined together were enough to take down several enemies. The wave of attacks attracted the attention of the enemy. They looked and saw a whole bunch of familiar names. Weren't they the ones with bounties on their heads? Rumors said they went around bullying stray guild players. Were they hallucinating? Why would they attack such a huge group like them? Be careful. They're here to rescue Lord Grimm. Everyone stay in formation. The group leader kept a clear mind and instantly figured out their intent. As soon as he said this, the dazzling light from the satellite beam dissipated. Lord Grimm had unexpectedly logged on in the middle of this and had already started running away. The King's Avatar, Chapter 546, Chapter 546, Breakout, You Scared Me. The voice that came out of Lord Grimm's character was actually a female's voice, who seemed to be grumbling at the person sitting next to her. Chen Guo hadn't thought that, as soon as Lord Grimm had logged on, her entire screen would be surrounded by light. Lord Grimm was completely enveloped by the satellite beam. Using this beautiful screen, no one noticed Lord Grimm's appearance. Because of the short period of invulnerability after logging in, Lord Grimm didn't receive any damage from the satellite beam. The reason behind Ye Xiu choosing to control the satellite beam split pillars manually was to force the surrounding enemies away. When Lord Grimm appeared and ran, no one would be able to block him immediately. However, escaping just like this clearly wasn't going to happen. Lord Grimm's log-off location had been marked as the center of the encirclement. The satellite beam descended on this location. The enemy encirclement had only been disturbed by Ye Xiu's chasing haze as well as Wei Chen's group. Actually breaking through would require much more effort than just running. Hurry up, Chen Guo anxiously urged. She was already standing up while controlling Lord Grimm. Ye Xiu quickly shifted to where she stood. Chen Guo also hastily moved away. The two switched characters, both attempting to escape. Chen Guo's chasing haze had originally been outside of the encirclement, but the enemy had instructed a team to surround her. But because of Wei Chen's sudden ambush, this team was instructed to hold their position, so chasing haze didn't have as much trouble escaping. The challenge was getting Lord Grimm to escape. Even though he had logged on cleanly without anyone immediately noticing his presence, he had now been completely exposed. Everyone immediately abandoned Wei Chen's 20 players and switched to chasing Lord Grimm. When Wei Chen saw that his gang wasn't even be considered bait and the enemy side completely ignoring them, he couldn't tolerate it. With an angry shout, he charged at the enemies along with his gang to prove their existence. Teams 5, 7, and 8 block that side. Everyone else surround Lord Grimm. The group leader could see the entire situation clearly. He had the 3 closest teams block Wei Chen's assault and had everyone else continue pursuing Lord Grimm. Ye Xiu hadn't touched glory in 2 days. Now that he had control over Lord Grimm again, he was filled with energy. He swiped his mouse and Lord Grimm shot his gun at the ground behind him. He flew into the air and onto a dead tree branch. On this dead tree branch hung the poor player who had been blasted into the air by the heat-seeking missiles. The tree branch couldn't hold the weight of both players and broke. The poor player fell. This attack had been too sudden. The players below were running while they aimed their weapons at Lord Grimm when they heard a cry from above their heads. Before they could lift their heads, their cameras went staggering towards the sky and they tumbled into the mud. Lord Grimm turned around. With a flash, the slash from a sword draw flew towards 2 players who were trying to flank him from the left. The players who were coming from the right were just about to use their own sword draws when Lord Grimm suddenly leapt into the air towards them and disappeared from their sight. Ye Xiu had used a Z-shake in order to slide past these players without slowing down. The blockade formed by these 3 players had been broken through, but there were still a lot of players left. Ye Xiu looked around in a circle. Without stopping, he quickly figured out the most optimal pathing. He crouched and rolled forward, dodging an attack from the left. As he got up, he blasted the enemy player away with a falling flower palm. However, because of the over 10 level difference, the blow-away effect from the falling flower palm was greatly reduced. It couldn't even be considered a blow away, more like a trip. Ye Xiu also felt grieved. If Lord Grimm had been level 70 and the falling flower palm worked normally, breaking through this encirclement would be a piece of cake. This had been within Ye Xiu's calculations, though. He continued running forward past the tripped player. Another pincer attack from the left and right came. Ye Xiu accurately predicted which attack would arrive first. He shook his 1000-chance umbrella into a spear and stabbed towards the left. Then, with a circle swing, he swung the enemy player on the left into the enemy player on the right, slamming both enemies into the ground. Fast. Too fast. The players that were still a distance away from Lord Grimm could only become spectators for now. In their eyes, Lord Grimm's attack had been very fast. Attack speed. This stat wouldn't increase as one leveled up. The only things that affected attack speed were the player's skill, equipment, and the special effects of their skills. If a player's skill was the only deciding factor in attack speed, then in theory, attack speed could be limitless. From this perspective, equipment was what restricted one's attack speed. However, in reality, this was a misconception. In Glory, weapons had an attack speed that ranged from 1 to 10. If a player's skill was poor, they might only be able to utilize an attack speed of 7 or 8, despite having a weapon with an attack speed of 10. If a player's skill was good, then the player could reach an attack speed of 10, but couldn't go any higher than that. However, a player could increase their attack speed with a skill. There might be a limit for speed, but how does one attack in the fastest way possible? By taking the shortest attack route. Thus, it could be said that in order to increase attack speed through the player's skill, the player needed to be precise, not quick. Precise judgment and control was required to perform the attack along the shortest route. Even with similar attack speeds, if one player attacks along a different route, it would take slightly longer for their attack to arrive. Lord Grimm's attack looked very fast because of this. In reality, all of the forms of the Thousand Chance umbrella had an attack speed of 5, but that didn't necessarily mean that this was his limit. An attack speed of 10 couldn't be considered the limit either. It was simply a limit set by the weapon. Other equipment and the effects from skills could also increase a player's attack speed. However, because of the mechanics of the game, having higher attack speed wasn't always better. If a player's attack speed was too high and the player couldn't keep up, then the player wouldn't be able to fully utilize the speed. The guild players were astonished at the speed of Lord Grimm's attack, but was Lord Grimm only fast with his attacks? His movement speed was also the same. Ye Xiu's extremely good control over his stamina allowed his movement speed tempo to constantly change, making the pursers unable to properly grasp it. They would predict that Lord Grimm would move to a spot, so they would release an attack targeting this spot. However, when Lord Grimm actually arrived at that spot, he would always seem to step over their attacks. They felt like Lord Grimm wouldn't reach a spot yet, so they held their attacks, but when they attacked, all they saw was his back. The guild's encirclement went from scattered to orderly, but before they could rearrange the troops properly, Lord Grimm had already broken through. Along the way were bodies flipped into the ground. No one had been severely hurt, but they lost their chance at blocking Lord Grimm. By the time they recovered, they would only see the body of the next person being thrown into the ground. "Stop him! Stop him! Stop him!" The group leader, who could be considered rational and quick-witted, could only resort to this. It wasn't that he didn't want a concrete formation. Lord Grimm's actions far surpassed the speed at which he could react. By the time he had thought of a way to stop him, Lord Grimm had already gotten past that section. He tried making predictions, but with Lord Grimm's weird pathing, he had no way to predict how Lord Grimm would break through. Conventionally speaking, the fastest way to break through was in a straight line, but Lord Grimm was already halfway out, and anyone could see that he wasn't moving in a straight line. He just moved wherever there was a hole. Where were the opportunities? Answering this question and then making the arrangements would require the group leader to think twice as much as Ye Xiu needed to. There was no way the leader could win a mind game like this. Besides shouting "Stop him!" he didn't know what else he could do. In the blink of an eye, Lord Grimm had broken past the final layer and rushed out of the encirclement. Everyone was stunned. What just happened? Everything happened so quickly. When did he break out of the encirclement? But after seeing everyone lying on the ground, they felt like a long amount of time should have passed, right? No one could get a clear understanding of the situation, but they could understand one thing. Lord Grimm had successfully escaped. Their 80 players had been thrown into disarray by an outside force and then broken through just like that. "Chase!" the group leader shouted. He felt like his voice was very mechanical. He felt like it was what he should shout. As for what he should do after, he had no idea. "Old thing, I'll be heading out first," they heard Lord Grimm shout. "Go, go, this senior is going to slaughter everyone here," a coarse voice responded. Lord Grimm ran away, but the 20 rescuers hadn't. They had been killing the entire time, whether they were against 3 players, 4 players, 5 players, or even 10 players. In the end, these 20 players eventually turned into corpses. They dropped some equipment, but the guild players couldn't feel happy at all. Compared to the equipment that they had lost, these 20 players had profited a lot more. They had no way of getting their lost equipment back either. They had been helpless against Lord Grimm's escape, but these 20 players had killed off 39 of their own players. They had lost almost twice as many people, and this was with the opposing side having incomplete equipment and levels. When the team leaders reported back to their respective guilds, they said this to their guild leaders: "We successfully eliminated the rescue team, but Lord Grimm escaped the King's Avatar." Chapter 547, Chapter 546. Breakout, you scared me. The voice that came out of Lord Grimm's character was actually a female's voice, who seemed to be grumbling at the person sitting next to her. Chen Yu hadn't thought that, as soon as Lord Grimm had logged on, her entire screen would be surrounded by light. Lord Grimm was completely enveloped by the satellite beam. Using this beautiful screen, no one noticed Lord Grimm's appearance. Because of the short period of invulnerability after logging in, Lord Grimm didn't receive any damage from the satellite beam. The reason behind Ye Xiu choosing to control the satellite beam split pillars manually was to force the surrounding enemies away. When Lord Grimm appeared and ran, no one would be able to block him immediately. However, escaping just like this clearly wasn't going to happen. Lord Grimm's log-off location had been marked as the center of the encirclement. The satellite beam descended on this location. The enemy encirclement had only been disturbed by Ye Xiu's chasing haze as well as Wei Chen's group. Actually breaking through would require much more effort than just running. Hurry up, Chen Guo anxiously urged. She was already standing up while controlling Lord Grimm. Ye Xiu quickly shifted to where she stood. Chen Guo also hastily moved away. The two switched characters, both attempting to escape. Chen Guo's chasing haze had originally been outside of the encirclement, but the enemy had instructed a team to surround her. But because of Wei Chen's sudden ambush, this team was instructed to hold their position, so chasing haze didn't have as much trouble escaping. The challenge was getting Lord Grimm to escape. Even though he had logged on cleanly without anyone immediately noticing his presence, he had now been completely exposed. Everyone immediately abandoned Wei Chen's 20 players and switched to chasing Lord Grimm. When Wei Chen saw that his gang wasn't even be considered bait and the enemy side completely ignoring them, he couldn't tolerate it. With an angry shout, he charged at the enemies along with his gang to prove their existence. Teams 5, 7, and 8 block that side. Everyone else surround Lord Grimm. The group leader could see the entire situation clearly. He had the 3 closest teams block Wei Chen's assault and had everyone else continue pursuing Lord Grimm. Ye Xiu hadn't touched glory in 2 days. Now that he had control over Lord Grimm again, he was filled with energy. He swiped his mouse and Lord Grimm shot his gun at the ground behind him. He flew into the air and onto a dead tree branch. On this dead tree branch hung the poor player who had been blasted into the air by the heat-seeking missiles. The tree branch couldn't hold the weight of both players and broke. The poor player fell. This attack had been too sudden. The players below were running while they aimed their weapons at Lord Grimm when they heard a cry from above their heads. Before they could lift their heads, their cameras went staggering towards the sky and they tumbled into the mud. Lord Grimm turned around. With a flash, the slash from a sword draw flew towards 2 players who were trying to flank him from the left. The players who were coming from the right were just about to use their own sword draws, when Lord Grimm suddenly leapt into the air towards them and disappeared from their sight. Ye Xiu had used a Z-shake in order to slide past these players without slowing down. The blockade formed by these 3 players had been broken through, but there were still a lot of players left. Ye Xiu looked around in a circle. Without stopping, he quickly figured out the most optimal pathing. He crouched and rolled forward, dodging an attack from the left. As he got up, he blasted the enemy player away with a falling flower palm. However, because of the over 10-level difference, the blow-away effect from the falling flower palm was greatly reduced. It couldn't even be considered a blow-away, more like a trip. Ye Xiu also felt grieved. If Lord Grimm had been level 70 and the falling flower palm worked normally, breaking through this encirclement would be a piece of cake. This had been within Ye Xiu's calculations, though. He continued running forward past the tripped player. Another pincer attack from the left and right came. Ye Xiu accurately predicted which attack would arrive first. He shook his 1,000-chance umbrella into a spear and stabbed towards the left. Then, with a circle swing, he swung the enemy player on the left into the enemy player on the right, slamming both enemies into the ground. Fast, too fast. The players that were still a distance away from Lord Grimm could only become spectators for now. In their eyes, Lord Grimm's attack had been very fast. Attack speed. This stat wouldn't increase as one leveled up. The only things that affected attack speed were the player's skill, equipment, and the special effects of their skills. If a player's skill was the only deciding factor in attack speed, then in theory, attack speed could be limitless. From this perspective, equipment was what restricted one's attack speed. However, in reality, this was a misconception. In Glory, weapons had an attack speed that ranged from 1 to 10. If a player's skill was poor, they might only be able to utilize an attack speed of 7 or 8, despite having a weapon with an attack speed of 10. If a player's skill was good, then the player could reach an attack speed of 10, but couldn't go any higher than that. However, a player could increase their attack speed with a skill. There might be a limit for speed, but how does one attack in the fastest way possible? By taking the shortest attack route. Thus, it could be said that in order to increase attack speed through the player's skill, the player needed to be precise, not quick. Precise judgment and control was required to perform the attack along the shortest route. Even with similar attack speeds, if one player attacks along a different route, it would take slightly longer for their attack to arrive. Lord Grimm's attack looked very fast because of this. In reality, all of the forms of the 1,000-chance umbrella had an attack speed of 5, but that didn't necessarily mean that this was his limit. An attack speed of 10 couldn't be considered the limit either. It was simply a limit set by the weapon. Other equipment and the effects from skills could also increase a player's attack speed. However, because of the mechanics of the game, having higher attack speed wasn't always better. If a player's attack speed was too high and the player couldn't keep up, then the player wouldn't be able to fully utilize the speed. The guild players were astonished at the speed of Lord Grimm's attack, but was Lord Grimm only fast with his attacks? His movement speed was also the same. Ye Xiu's extremely good control over his stamina allowed his movement speed tempo to constantly change, making the pursers unable to properly grasp it. They would predict that Lord Grimm would move to a spot, so they would release an attack targeting this spot. However, when Lord Grimm actually arrived at that spot, he would always seem to step over their attacks. They felt like Lord Grimm wouldn't reach a spot yet, so they held their attacks, but when they attacked, all they saw was his back. The guild's encirclement went from scattered to orderly, but before they could rearrange the troops properly, Lord Grimm had already broken through. Along the way were bodies flipped into the ground. No one had been severely hurt, but they lost their chance at blocking Lord Grimm. By the time they recovered, they would only see the body of the next person being thrown into the ground. "Stop him! Stop him! Stop him!" The group leader, who could be considered rational and quick-witted, could only resort to this. It wasn't that he didn't want a concrete formation. Lord Grimm's actions far surpassed the speed at which he could react. By the time he had thought of a way to stop him, Lord Grimm had already gotten past that section. He tried making predictions, but with Lord Grimm's weird pathing, he had no way to predict how Lord Grimm would break through. Conventionally speaking, the fastest way to break through was in a straight line, but Lord Grimm was already halfway out and anyone could see that he wasn't moving in a straight line. He just moved wherever there was a hole. Where were the opportunities? Answering this question, and then making the arrangements would require the group leader to think twice as much as Ye Xiu needed to. There was no way the leader could win a mind game like this. Besides shouting, "Stop him!" He didn't know what else he could do. In the blink of an eye, Lord Grimm had broken past the final layer and rushed out of the encirclement. Everyone was stunned. What just happened? Everything happened so quickly. When did he break out of the encirclement? But after seeing everyone lying on the ground, they felt like a long amount of time should have passed, right? No one could get a clear understanding of the situation, but they could understand one thing. Lord Grimm had successfully escaped. Their 80 players had been thrown into disarray by an outside force and then broken through just like that. "Chase!" the group leader shouted. He felt like his voice was very mechanical. He felt like it was what he should shout. As for what he should do after, he had no idea. "Old thing, I'll be heading out first," they heard Lord Grimm shout. "Go, go, this senior is going to slaughter everyone here," a coarse voice responded. Lord Grimm ran away, but the 20 rescuers hadn't. They had been killing the entire time, whether they were against 3 players, 4 players, 5 players, or even 10 players. In the end, these 20 players eventually turned into corpses. They dropped some equipment, but the guild players couldn't feel happy at all. Compared to the equipment that they had lost, these 20 players had profited a lot more. They had no way of getting their lost equipment back either. They had been helpless against Lord Grimm's escape, but these 20 players had killed off 39 of their own players. They had lost almost twice as many people, and this was with the opposing side having incomplete equipment and levels. When the team leaders reported back to their respective guilds, they said this to their guild leaders. "We successfully eliminated the rescue team, but Lord Grimm escaped the King's Avatar Chapter 548 Chapter 548 Unrivaled Super Hottie, why do you need a night account?" Wei Chen asked through QQ. Chen Guo, who was sitting beside him, also asked. Ye Xiu laughed, typing and saying the same thing, "To be a tank." "You don't say." Wei Chen replied as he sent a rolling his eyes emoji. Chen Guo, who was beside him, demonstrated a real-life eye roll while repeating the exact same words. "So what are you planning on doing?" Chen Guo asked again. "I'll join a guild and play as a tank," Ye Xiu said. "Did you mean to say that you're also going to be a spy?" "Pretty much." Ye Xiu's reply wasn't too clear. It looked his role couldn't just be described as being a spy. Chen Guo didn't fully understand what Ye Xiu meant, but she didn't ask any further. Ye Xiu was still playing on Lord Grimm. He was very close to level 55 and reached level 55 that afternoon, finally passing the level 50-55 stage, the most difficult stage he would face as an unspecialized character. "You finally reached level 55. Chen Guo felt the barrier had now been passed. "You're right, I'm finally level 55. I can start running dungeons to level up from now on. Leveling through dungeons is a lot easier," Ye Xiu sighed. Chen Guo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The difference between dungeoning and leveling areas was that you gained more experience through dungeon runs, but you could never say that it was easier. How hard was a dungeon? If you died carelessly a few times, you might lose even more experience than you would gain. However, Ye Xiu was a freak. He was the most hated player in the eyes of the big guilds and had to play cautiously while leveling in leveling areas. He had to leave every time he saw a random stranger. Inside a dungeon, it really would be a lot easier for him than in leveling area. "You said just yesterday that Lulan Slash isn't afraid to oppose the other big guilds, but I don't think you were ever afraid of them in the first place. I've never seen you try to maintain a good relationship with them," Chen Guo said. Ye Xiu smiled and replied in a bitter tone, "I don't have a choice. I don't have much time. I can only take the risky path, high risk, high reward. Other than that, what can I do to create a whole new team? Our aim isn't to pass the seeding tournament, but to be a threat to the other teams. I see, Chen Guo understood. Let me bring you through a dungeon. Right after she said this, Ye Xiu logged out of Lord Grimm. Since I'm already level 55, leveling isn't priority anymore. Ye Xiu smiled. Actually, Wei Chen's long year of research about earning extra skill points was now his priority. Along with that research, managing his account became a lot easier, so Ye Xiu had more time to do other things now. Ye Xiu pulled out the night account card after he logged out from Lord Grimm. Logging into the game, he turned his head and asked Chen Guo, "Do you have any money?" "Yes, how much do you need?" Chen Guo reached for her purse immediately. "I meant in-game money." Ye Xiu was speechless. "Oh. Game money, Chasing Haze has about 10,000 gold," Chen Guo said. In Glory, 100 or 200 gold coins wasn't considered rich. 1,000 to 2,000 would be the starting point, and was the amount most players had. 10,000 gold coins was the border between being rich or not rich. Chen Guo used to a member of a club guild, so she could be considered as a high-end player. 10,000 gold coins was a healthy amount of money. "Give me everything. I'm going to buy some equipment." Ye Xiu logged into his brand new night account. All the accounts that Ye Xiu had won last time had been checked by himself and Chen Guo. They were almost all completely empty accounts. Even if they had equipment, they were at best green mission equipments. Speaking of which, Ma Chengyi not giving them normal server accounts was already considered not being cheap. The difference between level 70 characters in normal servers and the heavenly domain was huge. Ma Chengyi's 24 accounts were all blank, but at least they were heavenly domain accounts. This night account had 4160 skill points, which was a very common amount. The few items he had equipped were all green recycle equipment. After a short scan, the stats for this character hadn't been completed either. Apparently, it had yet to finish all the missions that gave stat books. It would be really hard to figure out which quests were missing unless the previous owner was playing. Ye Xiu didn't care about these 5 or 10 extra stat points. It was the previous owner's id that truly showed how extraordinary he was. Unrivaled Super Hottie was its name, extraordinarily not low-key. Ye Xiu couldn't be bothered by the incomplete stats. However, this badass name made him a little uncomfortable deep inside. Ye Xiu had long since passed the age where one would tell others how good-looking he was with his id, "Come and get your money." Chen Guo looked at Ye Xiu controlling Unrivaled Super Hottie, causing her to laugh inaudibly, then logged into Chasing Haze to give Ye Xiu the money. Chasing Haze had 13,251 gold coins. She gave Unrivaled Super Hottie 13,000 gold coins, keeping the remaining 251. Ye Xiu was thinking as he walked to the trading center, and in a very short while he walked out in new clothes. Chen Guo quickly ran over because she wanted to know how a pro player would choose equipment for a tank. She was shocked the moment she leaned forward. "Click on them so I can see," Chen Guo said in disbelief. Ye Xiu opened Unrivaled Super Hottie's equipment panel, showing them off one by one to Chen Guo, while saying, "There is still 8,000 coins left, you can have them back." "You. Why are you saving so much money? Go get better items," Chen Guo said. All the equipment that Ye Xiu bought were blue. Who in Heavenly Domain didn't have a few purple equipment, even if they didn't have any orange ones? Especially for tanks in a stable team, it was always the first character that was invested in. A purple weapon and purple shield were the bare minimum. Turned out that Ye Xiu gave Unrivaled Super Hottie a very random blue weapon and shield. To be honest, a tank's job was probably the most important, and a tank's equipment wasn't expensive. Because playing as a tank was a harsh job, and the difficulty was high, ordinary players either misplayed the class or were too lazy to bother. It led to a small amount of tank players. The fewer players, the less demand and the price wouldn't go up. With 13,000 gold coins, players could barely afford a luxury weapon, but if you wanted to get a set of blue defensive equipment, a purple weapon and shield, it was more than possible. It's all right. Ye Xiu smiled and continued sending a trade request. Just keep the money, there's no meaning in giving it back to me. Chen Guo waved her hand and rejected. It was only a few thousand gold coins, so Ye Xiu clearly didn't really put it to mind. Chen Guo didn't want it back, so he just kept it. He then switched to QQ and messaged Lulan/. Your recent move was very well played, Ye Xiu started the conversation. Haha, I just happened to get the chance. Lulan/ was pretty satisfied with his move. Seeing how aggressive you were, are you sufficiently prepared? Ye Xiu asked. It's going so-so, Lulan/ replied. The reason I wanted to message you is to ask for some information, Ye Xiu said. What's up? Lulan/ asked. Do you know which sub-guilds belong to tyrannical ambition? Ye Xiu asked. God, you don't know, Lulan/ was surprised. It's because I am a god that I don't know, Ye Xiu said. I see, Lulan/ suddenly realized the reason. Ye Xiu was at the very top. Low-tier jobs like guild management wasn't something he was informed about. Let me check. Lulan/ had clearly been preparing for a long time. From the guild to the prawl team, they had both carefully been planned out. For their future opponents, they were also investigated from the guilds to their pro teams. There are a lot of sub-guilds in each large guild. Some are very obvious and others are more hidden. You want information about tyrannical ambition, right? I'll send you a copy after I compile a list. Lulan/ didn't hide their grasp of the situation. Although Ye Xiu hadn't given them any material assistance, but he had helped give them a lot of mental guidance. In particular, he allowed them to see their true position. This alone had greatly helped their chances of survival in the pro scene. If they really thought that they could win the championships like they had in the old days, they would be packing up as soon as they entered. Okay. Ye Xiu received the document that Lulan/ sent him shortly after. According to the document, tyrannical ambition had 27 branch guilds. Of these 27 branch guilds, 5 were publicly known. 7 of them were hidden and only Lulan/ knew about them. The other 15 were marked with question marks, indicating that they were still unconfirmed. Ye Xiu took a look and it was similar to what he had predicted. Although he did not know the exact situation of tyrannical ambition, as the former leader of Excellent Dynasty, a lot of information would flow towards him, even if he didn't want to know. Tyrannical ambition and Excellent Dynasty were both old-school guilds, so the difference shouldn't be that huge. Lulan/ had dug out 27 of them, but he also knew that his list might not be complete. The reason they hid them was not to hide their overall power. In fact, the real power of each guild could still be directly seen from their main guild. The members of branch guilds were players that might not necessarily fans of tyrannical ambition, but the guild was definitely secretly supporting or directly controlled by tyrannical ambition. They hoped to expand their control over resources and information through this method. Keeping them a secret was to prevent competitors from causing problems. And for those guilds that everyone knew, it was the same as the main guild, full of fans. Even if you weren't one, you had to pretend to be one in order to acquire the benefits. The King's Avatar, Chapter 549, Chapter 549. I'm a tank. You're planning on infiltrating tyrannical ambition. Chen Guo had been sitting in front of the computer for the entire day. 50% of her attention had been directed towards seeing what Ye Xiu was doing. If she needed to help Ye Xiu write a daily or weekly report, she didn't want to miss anything. Yes. Ye Xiu nodded his head. He was used to Chen Guo watching him and asking him questions from time to time. I feel bad for tyrannical ambition, Chen Guo said. Ha ha, of course. Ye Xiu laughed. After seeing Lulan/'s intelligence report, he immediately began searching for the listed guilds. The branches of tyrannical ambition that everyone knew about weren't guilds that Ye Xiu could get into because these branches raised tyrannical ambition's banners. Fans of tyrannical ambition were lining up to squeeze into one. With Glory's player base nowadays, filling several guilds couldn't be considered incredible anymore. These branches of tyrannical ambition were all full. The big guilds won people over by virtue, so it wasn't likely for them to kick someone out just to add someone out of kindness. Besides, who would be so kind to Ye Xiu? Knock on their door, tell Jiangyu, "I'm Ye Xiu, could you kick someone out and let me in?" If Jiangyu didn't immediately summon thousands of players to kill him, that would already be considered quite kind. Thus, Ye Xiu had to choose from the hidden branches of tyrannical ambition, or the guilds allied with tyrannical ambition. Lulan/" had given him a detailed report. He even had introductions for who controlled these branches. In the end, Ye Xiu chose a guild which someone from tyrannical ambition directly had control over. It was a guild called Exterminate the Heavens. Ye Xiu felt like such an arrogant name perfectly matched his unrivaled super hottie. Then there was Exterminate the Heavens guild leader, Senior Exterminate the Heavens. No explanation was needed. Ye Xiu applied for the guild without any hesitation. If Ye Xiu didn't have the information given by Lulan/, Senior Exterminate the Heavens guild would only seem like a normal player guild. Although it was also a max-leveled guild, it only had a little over 1,000 players. This was pretty much the limit for normal guilds. The guild leader's charisma could only do so much. Any more players and the guild would be very difficult to manage. The guild would need to use the guild storage as a foundation. However, building up a solid guild storage wasn't easy for normal players. They would never be able to compete with the money and prestige that a club guild possessed. Guild Exterminate the Heavens had 1024 players. For a normal guild, it was quite good. As long as the guild storage system began to circulate, the guild would gradually grow. These types of guilds could indirectly become branches of the club guilds. The clubs obviously wouldn't throw money to build up their guild storage. They just needed to make sure that the guild didn't fall apart, and the guild would naturally grow larger and stronger. As a normal guild, this sort of business wasn't something normal players would know about. As their gaming lives progressed, they would unknowingly grow alongside the guild. After Ye Xiu sent in an application, he pondered over his plan while waiting for the reply to come. The reason he had confidence in being accepted was very simple. Normal guilds didn't have players lining up to join them like the club guilds did. Normal guilds just added whoever wanted to join them. They might as well add you for now. Besides, Ye Xiu wrote a note when he applied. It was only 3 words, but these words were very eye-catching. The 3 words were, "I'm a tank." Yes, a tank. Most teams were centered around the tank. It could even be said that the number of teams were restricted to the number of tanks. If a team didn't have a tank, the team could only go and kill wild monsters. Dungeons and bossing would best be kept as dreams. Tanks were also high-end classes and difficult to play. Despite being the core of a team, not many people liked to play them. Thus, for most guilds, the words "I'm a tank" was very desirable. Sure enough, not long after Ye Xiu sent in an application, the guild added him. Someone in the guild greeted him, "Welcome, friend." Ye Xiu looked at the clove. This player was most likely a girl. After sending a thanks, Ye Xiu opened up the guild player list and skimmed through it. He also saw that the guild leader Senior Exterminate the Heavens was also online. "Oh, a new member," Senior Exterminate the Heavens finally spoke. "Hi, guild leader," Ye Xiu typed. Chengyu snorted. "So you're acting polite." "Hey," Ye Xiu said seriously. Then he saw a bunch of people speak up in the guild chat. The majority of them were just lurking around. There might not be too many people online in a 1,000-player guild, but there were enough. The chat kept flashing as messages kept on being typed. The guild was quite active. Whoa, a knight too, are you a tank? Someone saw the new member's class and shouted it out. Sure enough, the word tank was quite eye-catching. Knights were mainly played as tanks, but they didn't necessarily need to be. There were quite a few players who used knights as DPS classes. Of course, more players were interested in PvP. Knights had high defense and health, making them quite a formidable PvP class. Yeah, I'm a tank, Ye Xiu said. Oh, a tank. The guild leader clearly hadn't seen Ye Xiu's guild application, so he hadn't seen the note. When he heard the new member was a tank, he was very happy. What are your stats? Exterminate the Heavens asked. Stamina 750, Strength 520, Intelligence 414, Spirit 405. Ye Xiu reported. The chat suddenly fell silent. After a while, someone couldn't help but comment, so weak. Knights grew in a balanced manner similar to unspecialized characters. However, tanks naturally chose their equipment in a certain way. Stamina and health were their priorities. The rest would be switched out depending on the situation. Stacking strength would increase their physical resistance. Stacking intelligence, on the other hand, would there increase magic resistance. Stacking spirit would increase debuff resistances. Different equipment could be used against different opponents. However, the stats Ye Xiu reported didn't even pass as average. High-end tanks usually had over 1,000 stamina. The passing line for normal knights was 840 stamina. Ye Xiu was lower than the normal knight passing line by 90 stamina. In terms of stats, he was a legendary squishy tank. What are your equipments? Let me take a look at them. The guild leader Exterminate the Heavens sent a sweating emoji. I haven't played in a long time, so my equips aren't that good, Ye Xiu said. He let them have a look at his equipment. The guild veterans looked, and sure enough, they were all outdated pieces of equipment. Nowadays, it wasn't difficult to reach the passing line. After all, tanks played a special role and their equipment wasn't too expensive. How skilled are you? Exterminate the Heavens asked. Look at my name, Ye Xiu proudly replied. Ha, Chen Guo laughed. Unrivaled super hottie. Ye Xiu's name made everyone go speechless. Even Senior Exterminate the Heavens felt defeated. After a long period of silence, he coughed. Clove, make a team tonight and bring this brother out to get some equipment. Clove was the one who had added Ye Xiu into the guild. She clearly had a fairly high position to have that sort of authority. Senior Exterminate the Heavens meant that you're responsible for the person you added. Clove didn't object and replied with an okay. Then Ye Xiu received a friend request from Clove. He accepted and then received a message from Clove. When are you free tonight? I'm free anytime, Ye Xiu said. Then is 7 okay? Sure. I'll message you at 7 then, Clove said. Sounds good. What dungeon will we be running tonight? Ye Xiu asked. We'll be running Bone Dragon Abyss. The weapons and shields that from there are very suitable for you. The dungeon isn't too difficult either. Will there be any problems? Clove said. No, I was just asking. I'm going to go take a look at a guide, Ye Xiu said. Clove was speechless. See you tonight, Ye Xiu politely replied. Afterwards, the guild went quiet. The guild members were probably gossiping about unrivaled super hottie. After Ye Xiu joined the guild, he didn't have much else to do, so he went to a knight instructor. He reset his skill points and reallocated them. A skill reset wasn't free. The more times you used a skill reset, the more expensive it became. Besides, times when one made a huge mistake and needed to make a big fix, most players would wait until it was time for the game company to announce a special event for skill resets. Any other time, the players would just endure. Who would do a skill reset over a single error? At 7 p.m., Ye Xiu finished eating and logged onto Unrivaled Super Hottie. Chen Guo didn't want to miss it and was ready to watch him play. As soon as he got on, Clove immediately messaged him. You came. Yes, I'm here, Ye Xiu replied. Come to Kansas City, we'll go together, Clove typed. Ye Xiu teleported to Kansas City. This was a level 70 city. Whether it was a map or a city, the place wouldn't be as empty as a level 55 place. One could fully experience the gathering place for all glory players. No server could compare to the liveliness of a level 70 area in the heavenly domain. At the north gate of Kansas City, Ye Xiu saw Clove. She was a female cleric. Around her were 9 players with the tag Guild Exterminate the Heavens. Bone Dragon Abyss was a 10-player dungeon. They had been waiting for Ye Xiu to arrive. Ye Xiu hastily had unrivaled Super Hottie run over and turned on his guild tag. When he walked closer, he immediately asked, "Huh, why is there another night? If an equipment comes out, it won't be easy to split." The King's Avatar, thank you for listening to the story on kevinaudio.com, Chapter 550. Chapter 550. You can just be a leecher. Ye Xiu's question was normal. When they grouped up for a dungeon under the given conditions, they would normally spread out the classes. This would prevent conflicts between players of the same class when they found a piece of equipment they needed. Many groups experienced great storms and disbanded because of this very reason. It was a problem that had to be considered seriously. In response to Ye Xiu's question, someone humphed, "Bro, have you looked at my equipment? Would I want anything that drops from this dungeon?" When he heard this, it was obvious that the voice belonged to the knight, and pride filled his voice. He obviously felt disdain towards Ye Xiu, a useless tank whose vitality was only at 750. Clove also explained at once, "I called Crispy Bean over to help. He's our guild's chief tank. 950 vitality. Physical and magic defense, intelligence and strength are all over 762. He also has 700 spirit. If you were going to ask for help, why would you find a tank? There's me for a tank, right? Wouldn't it be better to find more DPS classes?" Ye Xiu asked. Clove felt uncomfortable the moment she heard his question. She originally didn't intend to find a tank to help, but she felt uneasy when Ye Xiu went to search for a guide for Bone Dragon Abyss this afternoon. A tank couldn't simply take on the leadership role just by looking at a guide. Driven by responsibility over the whole group, Clove couldn't entrust the whole group's life and death onto this tank who reads guides at the last minute. This explained why she specifically found a tank from the guild to help. She didn't expect unrivaled Super Hottie was unable to tell good from bad. Whatever. All noobs are like this. Clove thought this way, but she didn't want to waste words on Ye Xiu. She gathered everyone to start going into the dungeon. The tank called Crispy Bean wasn't happy though. "Oh wow, you're very capable, huh? To be honest, I'm not interested in this small dungeon at all. It's a total waste of my time. Since I'm not needed, then I shall take my leave." "If you leave, we'd be missing a person," Ye Xiu said. "What's scared now?" Crispy Bean laughed coolly. "It's not possible for you to only have tank equipment, so if you just change to your damage-oriented equipment, wouldn't that work?" Ye Xiu asked. "You. If I become a DPS class, would you be able to hold it?" Crispy Bean was immediately angered. As the chief tank of the guild, of course it would be impossible for him to lack equipment. Apart from tank equipment, he also had a strong collection of combat equipments for a knight. If he really switched to damage-oriented equipment, he was absolutely confident that he would be able to squeeze into the top 10 of Guild Exterminate the Heavens. Be honest, he was looking forward for a chance to present his ability in damage output. "You can try." Ye Xiu actually gave him a chance. "Very well, you said it yourself. Don't blame me if we get wiped." Crispy Bean's last sentence was aimed towards the crowd surrounding him. A flash on his character followed his statement, and it became evident that he already changed into his damage-oriented equipment. "That's enough, stop fooling around," Clove suddenly yelled out. "Crispy Bean, you're still the tank." As Clove spoke, she also sent a private message to Ye Xiu. "What's up with you? Everyone grouped up to help you get equipment. This person has no reason to take your equipment. All you have to do is be a leecher. What is there to be unsatisfactory about?" Ye Xiu saw that this girl even communicated with him through private message, and that she was concerned about everyone's feelings. Ye Xiu didn't continue to say anything else. In Crispy Bean's case, it was obvious that he didn't obey only because of Clove's previous yell. Ye Xiu reckoned that Clove also messaged him in private. He soon changed back into his tank equipment. His view scanned over Ye Xiu's unrivaled super hottie and stepped into the dungeon after giving a cold harumph. Other players closely followed after him into the dungeon. Ye Xiu commanded unrivaled super hottie to follow. Chen Guo wasn't far away from her game. She looked as if she were watching a movie. When she saw that Ye Xiu had started a conflict the moment he joined the group, she immediately felt that a good show would happen tonight. "You really are unbelievable," Chen Guo lamented. "I'm only speaking of the truth," Ye Xiu spoke. Chen Guo deeply agreed with this. Everything Ye Xiu said could drive a person crazy, but it was true. Chen Guo also believed Ye Xiu's words. Even though 750 vitality was a little low, who was he? This chief tank of Exterminate the Heavens or whatever guild dared to challenge God Ye Xiu. Chen Guo found it humorous just to think about it. Bone Dragon Abyss itself wasn't a difficult dungeon. In terms of tanks, a tank didn't need to have 840 vitality. The requirement line for 840 was expected of tanks themselves to enter more difficult group dungeons. A mere dungeon with only 10 people wouldn't even be necessary. What's more, with God Ye Xiu's skills, who knew how much those skills could make up for in stats? As an onlooker, she only pitied that she had to watch things unfold from the sidelines. It should be known that a tank had a busy role. If a professional player like Ye Xiu played one, she didn't know how fast the screen would move around, though it wouldn't be the first time she experienced it. A moment after, the 10 people of Guild Exterminate the Heavens was transported into Bone Dragon Abyss. Bone Dragon Abyss sat in a canyon. According to Glory's naming style, this canyon was named as Bone Dragon Abyss. The Wild Boss, Dungeon's final boss, and Hidden Boss were all bone dragons. According to the background storyline, these 3 bone dragons were actually brothers. Of course, that was when they had been alive, and now that they had become bone dragons, it was evident enough that they had already become imperishable organisms. Crispy Bean was Exterminate the Heavens' chief tank, so it could be said that he had gone through all of the dungeons in glory. With Guild Exterminate the Heavens' strength, they might have some difficulties in completing difficult dungeons that required a group of 100 people. However, a dungeon with 10 people like this was nothing to Crispy Bean. This explained why the moment he entered the dungeon, he immediately rushed up to steamroll through the monsters. In his eyes, these dungeons only played the part of being thoroughly crushed. Ye Xiu was one of the last of the 10-man team to enter the dungeon. By the time he was transported into the dungeon, the fight had already heated up at the front. A tank normally led the team in the dungeon. However, this was a dungeon that Crispy Bean looked down on, so why would he need to be the leader? Of course it wasn't needed. All he needed to do was cheer everyone on while they hurried to keep up with his pace. As a result, the whole group was more or less busy and messy. Ye Xiu was able to spot that at first glance. Crispy Bean was undoubtedly a veteran and Clove wasn't bad, but several other people in the group had showed themselves to be a little unaccustomed. They weren't unaccustomed to the mechanics of the game, but towards the dungeon. To be able to make it into Heavenly Domain and complete the Heavenly Domain's challenge meant that they wouldn't have any trouble or unfamiliarities with their mechanical performance. However, when faced with a foreign dungeon, they would obviously be at loss at what to do or where to strike. There were beginners in the Heavenly Domain. Those who had just cleared the Heavenly Domain challenge would be considered beginners. There were only 2 people like this in the 10th server. But how about the other servers? Not all players that reached the minimum required level could complete the Heavenly Domain's challenge on their first try. Ye Xiu and Kaio Yifan were exceptions. They were pro gamers and had skill to back them up, so they could pass the challenge at the mere levels of 50 or 55. However, towards normal players, the challenge task was most definitely not that simple. After reaching the minimum required level, a lot of people had to spend a certain amount of time to acquire stronger pieces of equipment. Using strong equipment to face quests and a lot of combat consumables could help in completing in the challenge. Moreover, the PvP arena could be counted as the easiest part for Ye Xiu and Caio Yifan. However, it wasn't so easy for normal players. When fighting a boss, there was a regular pattern to find, but there was never a fixed pattern in PvP. In particular, the requirement to win consecutively was extremely fatal for normal players. As a result, newer servers like the 8th or 9th server had a lot of people who had reached level 70, but had yet to pass the challenge to enter the heavenly domain. On top of this, people didn't necessarily start from the 10th server. Actually, if a player would like to enter the heavenly domain as soon as possible, an older server would be a better choice. There would be high-leveled players to power level your character. The speed in which one could level up would be a lot faster in comparison to those in the new server. Therefore, there was a constant stream of players entering the heavenly domain. Ye Xiu reckoned that the other 8 people belonged to this group of players. At the very least, they hadn't entered the Bone Dragon Abyss dungeon before. This group wasn't exactly organized just to assist him in getting better equipments. Clove also grouped up the people so they could come and try Bone Dragon Abyss. How could a group like this work without a leader? Crispy Bean didn't care about it, so only Clove could attempt to take charge. However, it was super inconvenient when she had to instruct Ye Xiu, the reason being the name of Ye Xiu's knight. Unrivaled Super Hottie. What was she supposed to call him? If she called him by the full name, it would take too long and be a waste of time. Call him Unrivaled, Super Hottie. Clove found it hard to call out any of the words broken apart. She wanted to puke just thinking about how shameless a person had to be to come up with such a name. In the end, Clove called Ye Xiu you. She called the names of everyone else, except when she reached Ye Xiu, she would say you, so on and so forth. After having gone through a little bit of confusion in the beginning of the dungeon, everything finally started to stabilize under Clove's commands. She was in the heavenly domain, so her foundation was already there. Dungeons were pretty much the same. Basic problems, like what to be aware of, was the same in every dungeon. These people obviously wouldn't make any noob mistakes. There wouldn't be any major problems if they obeyed the leader. The group continued killing as Crispy Bean gradually started to talk more, but he was mostly complaining. He was obviously very dissatisfied about their progression speed. In the end, he even cleared his throat and told everyone to do their best to focus on their damage output and not to worry about aggro going off the tank. Finally, the group reached the first boss. Before they fought the boss, they made some slight adjustments. When Crispy Bean opened up the damage output list, he mercilessly sent it into the group chat at once. Ye Xiu's Unrivaled Super Hottie was ranked second to last, just above Clove, who was responsible for the healing. "You really are a talent," Crispy Bean taunted. "Not really. I'm earnestly leeching." Ye Xiu replied the King's Avatar Chapter 551 Chapter 551. Proof of strength. His teammates hadn't responded yet, but Chen Guo already looked like she was about to cough blood. When she saw the team's attitude towards Ye Xiu, she was looking forward to the following show. For example, if Ye Xiu didn't have the tank deal damage, the tank, Crispy Bean, wouldn't be able to hold the boss and the boss would go out of control. Chen Guo believed Ye Xiu had the ability to make this happen, but the more she watched, the more doubtful she became. As Ye Xiu controlled his character, he didn't even touch his keyboard. His left hand only moved to walk, attack, or activate a skill. Otherwise it rested on the table, Only his right hand moved sometimes. His headphones hung over his neck, sending out noise through the speakers. Is he planning on messing up the aggro by playing like a noob? Chen Yu originally had faith in this god's ability, so she continued to patiently watch him play, but the tank Crispy Bean never lost control over the aggro. Chen Yu thought about it. Crispy Bean wasn't a bad tank and small monsters died relatively quickly, so perhaps there wasn't enough time to deal enough damage to pull the aggro. If you just went up ahead of the tank and pulled the monster, it would be too obvious. The team would see through your ploy instantly. Thus, Chen Guo felt like Ye Xiu would show off his godly might when the boss came. However, the first boss went by and only one sentence resulted from it. "I'm just leeching." When Ye Xiu said this sentence, he wasn't even sitting up straight. His head wasn't even supported by the back of his chair, and it looked like it would fall off. His mouse clicked a few times as he spoke indifferently. "What's wrong with you?" Clover wasn't happy. Even though she had told him it would be okay to just leech off them, she never thought that he would actually leech. The heavenly domain didn't have noobs. Let alone Clover. The other 8 team members could tell just from the numbers from the damage chart that he was leeching. The 9th place character was only a third of the 8th place character in the damage chart. Ye Xiu's unrivaled super hottie didn't have good equipment, but everyone else besides Crispy Bean had low-tier equipment as well. In fact, their equipment was of the same tier as unrivaled super hotties. Although unrivaled super hottie's equipment was meant for a tank, his DPS shouldn't be a third of the next lowest player's DPS. Crispy Bean listened and turned around to look at unrivaled super hottie. He looked as if he had just heard a joke. "What? You're that petty? Do you really think you leeching will make things difficult for us? How conceited of you. Let me tell you something. With your attitude, even if a night equipment drops, you don't have the qualification to pick it up. Donating it to the guild storage would be more useful than giving it to you." "Crispy Bean," Clove shouted. She clearly felt like Crispy Bean had gone too far. "I don't think he has those sort of thoughts. If he really wanted to grief, there are lots of better ways to do so. He could just run around randomly and pull a bunch of monsters over, but that's not what he's doing. All of you know I'm the leader." When Clover said he, she suddenly paused. She originally wanted to say that unrivaled super hottie was following orders and hadn't made any mistakes, but right when she was about to say it, she suddenly realized, had she even given any instructions to unrivaled super hottie? She decided to call him you, after thinking about how to address him, but she had never said you besides in the small argument from before. If she hadn't given him any orders, then it meant he didn't need any orders. On the other hand, Clover had been correcting the others the entire time. She only realized this now. Crispy Bean misunderstood her pause, though. He thought Clover had realized unrivaled super hottie had attempted something harmful, but then again, as an outstanding tank, if someone had intentionally tried griefing, he would have definitely known about it. Thinking about this, Crispy Bean spoke. "Isn't it too obvious if he does it that way? If some sort of hidden opportunity appears, do you think he won't take advantage of it?" "He won't," Clover said with certainty. She seemed to have discovered something after looking back. Clover's confident tone surprised Crispy Bean. For Clover to have asked him for help indicated that their relationship was quite good. Crispy Bean didn't want to have a dispute with Clover, but he was still very angry with this extremely arrogant guy, so he said, "Fine. Then I won't say anything but tell him to stop leeching. If he wants equipment, he has to have the skill to earn it." Crispy Bean's disdain could be heard through his voice. He emphasized the words leeching and skill in a mocking tone. "Can you play more seriously? Don't leech anymore," Clover helplessly told Ye Xiu. Crispy Bean's words made sense. For a dungeon run by a guild team, the equipment would usually be split among the team members. When a desirable equipment dropped, there would usually be rules to decide who earned it. Ye Xiu's leeching would clearly eliminate him from contention. Okay. The other side had said so many words, but Ye Xiu simply said a single word. He looked like he was about to fall asleep. He sat up, moved his left hand back to the keyboard, and adjusted his mouse. Chen Guo was sitting beside him, so she heard the entire conversation. She thought Ye Xiu was about to show these people his might, but all he said was a dull okay. Just like the previous earnestly leeching, Chen Guo felt very disappointed once again. Unsatisfied, she spoke her thoughts. What a letdown. Ye Xiu turned his head to look at her. How can you stand such disdain? You actually leeched off of them. Attack, grief them. Chen Guo just wanted to see these guys lose control over the boss and turn the place into a horror scene. How boring. If you were playing and the team gave you the chance to leech, would you play seriously? Ye Xiu asked. Of course, how else can you prove your strength? Chen Guo said. Prove my strength? Ye Xiu mumbled. He took a worn-out piece of paper out of his pocket and threw it at Chen Guo. What are you doing? Chen Guo thought that Ye Xiu had thrown some trash at her. Strength. Ye Xiu pointed at the worn-out piece of paper. Chen Guo uncrumpled it. It said, Glory Pro Alliance Season 3 MVP, Ye Xiu. This worn-out piece of paper was actually a Glory Pro Alliance MVP award certificate. Most people would hang it on a wall and frame it in a conspicuous place, but Ye Xiu had crumpled it up so much that it looked like a piece of trash. You're so annoying. Chen Guo was mad. She threw the paper back at Ye Xiu, who grabbed it and put it back into his pocket. She understood what Ye Xiu meant. This piece of paper was enough to prove Ye Xiu's strength, or perhaps it was to say that he didn't need to prove his strength. He didn't need to go all out to prove his existence. He was perfectly content with others calling him a leech. But now, the others didn't want him to, so Ye Xiu had to at least put some effort in. However, Chen Guo doubted that he would actually play seriously, because if he actually played seriously, the team's only choice would be to have him be main tank. Is everybody ready? If everyone is ready, I'm going to pull the boss. Crispy Bean asked the team. After hearing everyone's reply, he charged at the boss. At the same time, a figure flashed beside him. Crispy Bean turned his head and looked. It was that disgusting name again, Unrivaled Super Hottie. What are you doing? Crispy Bean shouted. He thought this guy was actually going to grief them. Chen Guo was getting excited. Was Ye Xiu going to steal the tank position? Ha ha, witness the power of a god. Crispy Bean or whatever, get the hell out of here. It doesn't feel good to have someone with a name like that be a tank. Crispy Bean. Do bosses roast you to a crisp? Damage, Ye Xiu casually said. Wait until the tank is pulled before attacking. Don't you understand? Crispy Bean roared. Not just Crispy Bean, but the others were furious too. Everyone knew that for a boss fight, the tank should be given some time to establish aggro before attacking. What? Am I in front of you? Ye Xiu shook his head. Crispy Bean turned his head back. He saw Bone Abyss's boss Guardian Kaiwei raise his humongous axe and charge forward. The aggro was still on Crispy Bean, but this was because Crispy Bean had walked into Guardian Kaiwei's aggro range. If Unrivaled Super Hottie attacked, the aggro would transfer to him. Thinking of this, Crispy Bean immediately attacked. Almost at the same time, Unrivaled Super Hottie also attacked Guardian Kaiwei. Kick him out of the team, Crispy Bean yelled at Clover. Clover clearly suspected Unrivaled Super Hottie's actions too. She had already opened up the team interface when she heard him say helplessly, "What are you yelling for? Isn't the aggro still on you?" The King's Avatar Chapter 552 Chapter 552, Controlling Aggro Through Damage Boss Aggro. At this moment in time, Crispy Bean had completely forgotten about it because he had also been aggroed by Unrivaled Super Hottie. He suddenly woke up after hearing his argument. When he took a closer look, he realized Guardian Kaiwei's aggro was still on him. Guardian Kaiwei's huge axe hadn't turned towards Unrivaled Super Hottie despite his attack. The huge axe was still swinging towards Crispy Bean. Bang! He immediately raised the shield in his hands. It was a frequently used movement for tanks. The huge axe collided with Crispy Bean's shield. The attack clearly wasn't anything earth-shaking. Crispy Bean's equipment far surpassed the necessary threshold for this dungeon. He didn't budge a single inch when he blocked the blow. Almost at the same time, he swung his sword and slashed at Guardian Kaiwei. Almost at the same time as him, Crispy Bean also saw unrivaled Super Hottie swing his shield at Guardian Kaiwei's head. Shield attack. This skill could induce a dizzying effect, but all bosses had high resistances to status effects. Bosses couldn't be controlled by players so easily, otherwise they would be too easy to beat. Guardian Kaiwei was a dragon guardian, and natural had immunity to magic status effects. However, the guardian did not have complete immunity to physical skills like shield attack. After taking the shield attack, the guardian's eyes went blurry and he became dizzy. But for bosses, status effects wouldn't last long. Crispy Bean had to face the boss directly as the tank, so he knew the boss's stats, skills, resistances, and patterns very clearly. He also had a good understanding of his own knight class, so he immediately calculated that with unrivaled Super Hottie's strength stat, the dizzy effect would only last for 1 second maximum. However, at the same time, a lot of things happened during this 1 second window. Crispy Bean took advantage of this 1 second window. Previously, his mind had wandered away because of his enmity towards unrivaled Super Hottie. After blocking with his shield and striking back, he wasn't sure what to do next. This 1 second window gave Crispy Bean enough time to figure out his next moves. If he didn't have this 1 second, he would have been hit by Guardian Kaiwei's counterattack. This was only the first mini-boss in the dungeon. Crispy Bean had exceptional equipment too, so eating the counterattack wouldn't have been the end of the world. But what if this had been a difficult dungeon? What if it was a boss with extremely hard-hitting attacks? 1 second of rest was especially important. Even though this 1 second was insignificant in this case, it gave him time to recover. 1 second passed by quickly. After recollecting his thoughts, Crispy Bean began pulling aggro like his usual self. Crispy Bean hadn't noticed the importance of the 1 second though. He was even a bit angry at unrivaled Super Hottie for his shield attack because of the same reason as before. He had yet to establish the boss's aggro. Was this guy trying to kill himself by attacking the boss? This guy didn't know how to exercise constraint. Right now, he was actually fighting over the boss with Crispy Bean. The two were attacking Guardian Kaiwei at nearly the same time. The others hadn't moved yet. Teams usually waited for the tank to tell them to attack before attacking. Clover healed him from time to time. The healing wasn't done immediately. After all, healing could also aggro the boss. If she healed him immediately, she might accidentally steal the boss's aggro away from the tank. Unrivaled Super Hottie. Clover already had the team interface out with her mouse hovering over his name. She was just about to kick him out of the team. Then she heard him say, "Isn't the aggro still on you?" which made her hesitate. If the aggro control hadn't been messed up, then there was no need to kick him out of the team. Clover felt like she should teach the new member of the guild rules. She didn't need to be so strict. During her moment of hesitation, the two had gone back and forth attacking the Guardian Kaiwei several times already. Everyone was watching in shock, including Crispy Bean. Flustered and exasperated, he shouted, "Kick him out of the team," twice. Clover didn't move though. She simply replied, "Good aggro control." Crispy Bean really wanted to shout. He could steal away the boss's aggro at any moment. But he resisted. For a tank, especially the top tank in a guild with exceptional equipment, he felt too ashamed to say such words. Both people were tanks. His equipment was better and the aggro was still on him. Why did he need to worry about a squishy tank stealing away the aggro? Crispy Bean felt a bit regretful. He felt like he had lost too much face. Those "kick him out of the team" shouts were mostly done in anger at unrivaled Super Hottie's actions, But what if the others misunderstood it as being unable to manage the aggro? Wasn't that what Clover's reply meant? He definitely didn't want to be misunderstood. Crispy Bean shouted inwardly. He didn't want to think about whether or not his kick him out of the team. Shouts had shown his fear of losing control of the boss. You want to steal the boss's aggro from me? That won't be possible. Finally, Crispy Bean shouted at unrivaled Super Hottie. Senior, I'm D-Sing. I'll control the aggro well. Unrivaled Super Hottie replied. D-Sing, control the aggro. These words made everyone's hearts thump. If he could completely control the boss's aggro when he was attacking, directly going up to attack the boss wasn't an issue as long as he had the confidence that he wouldn't mess up. Did this squishy tank actually have that type of control? In glory, damage, healing, and taking damage could all be calculated. However, aggro couldn't. This completely depended on a player's intuition and experience. As a result, they didn't know how well unrivaled Super Hottie was controlling his aggro. They only saw him attacking immediately after Crispy Bean. Every time he did it, everyone's hearts would jump. They felt like any one of his attacks could make the boss go out of control. Unrivaled Super Hottie, how about you wait before D-Sing? Clover finally spoke, and for the first time she shouted out his shameless name. No need, Crispy Bean replied to her. Crispy Bean had entered a full-on competitive mode. As the main tank with exceptional equipment, it would be a disgrace to lose control of the aggro to this guy. Even telling others his worries over the situation would be shameful. Right now, Crispy Bean was determined to show off his ability as a tank. Yeah, there's no need. I'll control it well. I won't snatch the aggro from you. Ye Xiu also replied. You just try and snatch it from me, Crispy Bean said. His hands moved like a blur. If he had been taking it easy in the beginning, he was completely serious now. Snatch it, snatch it, snatch it, Chen Guo urged Ye Xiu. She really wanted to see this type of situation. Little kid. Ye Xiu gave Chen Guo a disdainful look. He ignored her and continued to control his damage output. After a short moment, Ye Xiu asked, why isn't anyone else coming up? How long do you need to establish aggro before it's stable? Crispy Bean heard this and furrowed his brow. He had been too focused and had forgotten about it. If the tank didn't say anything, the others wouldn't dare to attack. He hadn't said anything, which actually resulted in this squishy tank questioning his ability. I forgot, Crispy Bean explained. It was true, but it sounded bad. Clover heard him speak, and not waiting for Crispy Bean to give the order, she immediately ordered, everybody advance. The field became a beautiful sight to behold. Guardian Kaiwei was only a mini-boss. The Guardian only had powerful single-target attacks. He didn't have any strong AI skills, so with the aggro being controlled well, everyone could safely attack. How could Crispy Bean be careless? He was afraid the aggro would shift onto unrivaled Super Hottie. He was taking this originally easy dungeon more seriously than a 100-player team dungeon. Under everyone's attacks, Guardian Kaiwei's health rapidly dropped until it fell. The Guardian dropped an equip. Clover went up to look. It was a Dragon Guardian axe. This weapon could be used by priest classes, clerics, paladins, exorcists, or knights. There were currently 3 priest classes in the team: Crispy Bean, Unrivaled Super Hottie, and Clover. Clerics could also use axes, but because clerics prioritized intelligence, physical attack weapons like axes didn't suit them. Crispy Bean already had equipment that surpassed equipment that could be found in this dungeon, so he didn't need this Dragon Guardian axe. It looked like Ye Xiu's Unrivaled Super Hottie was the only choice. However, as a guild team, there were other options too. For example, the team could choose to donate the equip to the guild storage and then split the guild contribution points later. Another choice was to sell the item for money and then split the money. For a team specifically meant to get equipment for Unrivaled Super Hottie, under normal circumstances, no one would object to Clover giving the Dragon Guardian axe to Unrivaled Super Hottie. However, there was a lot of controversy surrounding this guy. Someone with a leech-like performance was going to be the first to get equipment. Would the others be unhappy with it? Clover was still hesitating. The others were already asking what she got. Clover showed everyone the Dragon Guardian axe to see. The suitable classes for it made many disappointed. In the end, that unrivaled super hottie laughed out loud. "Ha ha, it's mine. Thanks everyone. Do you feel no shame?" Sure enough, Crispy Bean had the same thoughts as Clover, except he spoke his feelings without any hesitation. "What, you want it too? If you want it, you can have it. Tanks get priority," Ye Xiu said. "Why the FCK would I want this?" Crispy Bean was about to go insane. The King's Avatar, Chapter 553. Chapter 553. Damage Output Competition. Crispy Bean didn't care about any of the equipment that dropped from Bone Dragon Abyss. Just now, this unrivaled super hottie actually thought he wanted to compete for the axe. It made him feel like he was being looked down upon. "What, you don't want it? If you don't want it, then who else would want it?" Ye Xiu asked. Clover really felt worried. Did this guy really not know the rules, or was he pretending not to know? She didn't want to say it in public, so she privately messaged Unrivaled Super Hottie. "I told you you could leech and the first equipment that dropped can be used by you, but how am I supposed to give it to you like this?" "Oh, don't worry. I'll just use it temporarily. Once I get out of the dungeon, I can give it to you. I'm a tank, so why would I need this weapon, but wouldn't it be better to temporarily use it to raise my DPS?" Ye Xiu replied. Clover was surprised. She hadn't thought he would reply in such a way. When an equipment was given to someone, the system would notify those in the team, so she had to say a few words before giving it out. Clover told the rest she would give Unrivaled Super Hottie the axe temporarily. After explaining the reason, she handed the Dragon Guardian axe to Unrivaled Super Hottie. "Shua." Ye Xiu immediately switched his knight's sword and shield with the Dragon Guardian axe. This axe was a dual-handed weapon, so he wouldn't be able to equip both the shield and the axe. The Dragon Guardian axe wasn't anything unique. It was just big, and the two blood-red streaks on the two sides of the axe made it quite eye-catching. Right now, it looked very powerful in Unrivaled Super Hottie's hands. The other players looked at him in envy. Crispy Bean glanced at him and then continued to pull monsters. The dungeon battle continued. Unrivaled Super Hottie, with his new Dragon Guardian axe, was no longer leeching. He was on the front lines killing monsters. Clover, as the rear support, paid more attention to Unrivaled Super Hottie and realized that he didn't need any instruction from her. His coordination with the rest of the team was solid. When she checked the total damage charts, she jumped in fright. Even though Unrivaled Super Hottie was still in 9th place, his numbers had increased greatly. Before, he had only been a third of the player in the 8th position, but now he was already 2/3. And during this time, they had only killed the first boss and cleared 3 waves of monsters. Even though Unrivaled Super Hottie had switched his equipment, it shouldn't have been able to make him increase his damage by so much. Thus, most of the damage must have been from attacking the first boss. The boss's health was equivalent to several waves of monsters. However, at that time, Unrivaled Super Hottie was only wearing his original equipment. He didn't have any advantage over the other players on the team, but for him to be able to catch up so quickly, what skill! His ability to output damage must mean his skill level wasn't ordinary. After Clover noted this point, she paid more attention to Unrivaled Super Hottie. With his Dragon Guardian axe, the current Unrivaled Super Hottie had already caught the eye of the other team members. When Clover looked at the damage charts, she saw that Unrivaled Super Hottie was rapidly rising in the ranking, nearing the player in 8th place. Once he caught up to 8th place, he wouldn't be too different from everyone else. The other 7 players were all around the same skill level. Even though there were differences, the differences weren't large. The player in first place was Crispy Bean, the tank. After all, he had the equipment advantage and the tank's attack couldn't be too low. Damage was a huge factor in calculating aggro. Only by relying on aggro-inducing skills wouldn't be able to provide stable control over the monster. This person isn't simple, Clover finally concluded. Not just her, but the other players also noticed this. The players who liked to check the damage charts saw his huge rise upwards. Even though he had just gotten the Dragon Guardian axe, it was only a slight advantage. Everyone's equipment had level 70 requirements. There couldn't be a heaven and earth difference between the weapons. Unrivaled Super Hottie's rise couldn't be brought about solely because of the weapon. Everyone else began to raise their damage output. Even though the enemies were NPCs in PvE, players liked competing with other players. The competition in PvE was only slightly different than competition in PvP. PvP was a battle between players, while PvE was a battle of numbers. The players in the team had started a numbers battle over damage output. No one wanted to lag behind. With the start of this competition, their battle strength soared and they advanced through the dungeon even faster. In the blink of an eye, they reached the second boss in Bone Dragon Abyss. It was the same as the first boss. Crispy Bean went forward to pull the boss and Unrivaled Super Hottie went forward with him. Crispy Bean already had no more words to say to him, but Unrivaled Super Hottie had already proved that he didn't have any intention of causing trouble. The first boss battle also proved his ability to control aggro. He wouldn't be an obstruction to the main tank. Crispy Bean remained silent and just hit the boss. However, he also paid attention to Unrivaled Super Hottie's fighting method. He realized Unrivaled Super Hottie was fighting slightly differently than when he fought the first boss. The other 7 DPS players were very worried. When they reached this boss, Unrivaled Super Hottie caught up from his 1/3 damage deficit. Even though he was still in 9th place, he was very close to the others. He had rushed forward to start putting out damage, but the others could only watch helplessly. If this kept going, wouldn't they just be watching his damage surpass their damage? However, the tank hadn't said anything yet, so they didn't dare to move. Unrivaled Super Hottie dared to fight alongside the tank without the tank losing aggro, but they didn't have the ability to do that. They thought it was probably because he played as a tank and knew the Knight class well, so he had a good grasp over managing aggro. Normal players could also manage aggro, but not as precisely as he could. The 7 others could only watch in helplessness. Having not heard Crispy Bean say anything in a long time, they were starting to look down on him. It's been so long and he still hasn't established the aggro. It had only been 5 seconds since Crispy Bean had pulled the boss. However, for the 7 other players, those 5 seconds felt like eternity. Finally, everyone heard Crispy Bean shout, "Everyone up!" The 7 impatient players immediately pounced on the boss like tigers and went all out. One of the brothers had charged forward too ferociously and crashed into Crispy Bean. Teammates couldn't do damage to each other, but it could still mess up his positioning. The crash had caused Crispy Bean to shift slightly, resulting in his shield failing to block the second boss's attack. "What are you doing?" Crispy Bean roared. This normal player didn't have the courage to shout back at the tank. He hastily whimpered sorry. He moved 2 steps back and then started putting out damage. If he didn't, he would fall behind. Their fierce attacks caused blood to constantly spurt from the boss. With a strong tank, the boss battle wasn't anything difficult. The second boss quickly fell. No one cared about the drops. They immediately pulled up the damage charts. FCK. With just one boss, Unrivaled Super Hottie shot past the other 7 players. In addition, compared to the slight differences between the 7, the second-place Unrivaled Super Hottie was far ahead of them now. He had even shrunken the distance between the player and first, who had a huge advantage in equipment. Too amazing. The others could only admit their defeat. In the beginning, he had just been leeching, but as soon as he stopped leeching, his damage output immediately soared. In addition to his weapon advantage, they couldn't compete anymore. At this moment, Clover picked up the equipment and showed it to everyone. Everyone immediately began murmuring, "Angry Dragon Sword." It was a level 70 greatsword, which berserkers or blade masters could use. In the team, there was a berserker and a blade master. However, this blade master used lightsabers, so he didn't have any proficiency in greatswords and backed away in tears. The berserker shouted in happiness and took the angry dragon sword in front of everyone's envious eyes. This berserker placed fourth in the damage charts. His spirit rose after switching equipment. He had more confidence now, but he had completely forgotten that unrivaled Super Hottie had caught up from a 2/3 damage deficit. He had surpassed them after killing the monsters between the first and second boss. A better weapon clearly wouldn't account for such a rise. But in any case, the other 7 hadn't been too far apart in damage output. With a better weapon, his damage output would clearly be shown. After killing a few waves, the berserker reached 3rd place and looked like he could compete with the 2nd place unrivaled Super Hottie. The other 7 players felt somewhat disheartened. At this moment, one of the players who found an item shouted in joy, "Team leader, hurry up and come over here." "What is it?" Clover immediately went over. One of the monsters had dropped a golden weapon. When she picked it up, she was surprised. Blue weapon. A mob monster had actually dropped a blue weapon. In terms of probability, small monsters obviously had the chance to drop good equipment, but it was a very low chance. If not, why would bosses be valuable? However, their team had gotten good fortune. A small monster had actually dropped a blue weapon. They were in the Bone Dragon Abyss, so the equipment dropped would be from the dungeon. This dagger was given to the assassin who found it. Thus, another person began rising up on the damage charts. After several waves, the 2 with better weapons had pulled a distance apart from the others. But at the same time, they also discovered that unrivaled Super Hottie had widened the distance even farther. That guy was clearly going after the 1st place Crispy Bean, but that Crispy Bean had equipment that far surpassed theirs. He had several pieces of purple equipment. With such great equipment, wouldn't his damage output naturally be high? The King's Avatar Chapter 554, only Crispy Bean wasn't aware of the huge shift on the damage chart. As a tank, Crispy Bean also had to put out damage, but with his exceptional equipment, it was obvious that his damage output would be greater than the rest of the team. Thus, he had only checked before the first boss and saw his gigantic lead. At the same time, he looked down on unrivaled Super Hottie's leeching, and then stopped paying attention to the chart afterwards. After beating the 3rd mini-boss, everyone took a break. Crispy Bean took a look at the damage chart out of boredom and jumped up in surprise. The second to last place unrivaled Super Hottie was no longer there. Crispy Bean counted from the bottom one at a time, until he saw him in 2nd place. In addition, his damage numbers were about to surpass his own. "How is that possible?" Crispy Bean wailed. Even if he was a tank, his equipment advantage should put him far above everyone else, but at this moment he was about to be beat. Crispy Bean had a hard time believing it. "What is it?" Crispy Bean's cry had caught the attention of the others in the team. No one except Clove said anything. "Oh, it's nothing. I was just looking at some gossip," Crispy Bean said. "What gossip?" Clove asked again. It's nothing, I saw wrong." Crispy Bean hastily excused himself. He simultaneously looked at unrivaled Super Hottie and began examining his equipment. Could there be some sort of abnormal equipment that I overlooked? Crispy Bean thought. He carefully checked every equipment on unrivaled Super Hottie, not neglecting even a piece of jewelry. Nothing. He had nothing abnormal on him. Crispy Bean was quite experienced with night equipment. The equipment on unrivaled Super Hottie exposed his poverty. Even the Dragon Guardian axe wasn't anything in Crispy Bean's eyes. None of his equipment had any hidden strength. How is that possible? How is that possible? Crispy Bean didn't dare to express his doubts. He could only mutter to himself. His cry hadn't disrupted the team's mood. The third boss had actually dropped another weapon. Players place the most value on weapons. In this dungeon, 3 bosses and a monster had dropped a total of 4 weapons. Their luck this run was extremely good. Everyone was happily discussing their luck. It was too bad the 4th weapon was a ninjato though. The team didn't have any ninjas, so no one could use it. In the end, the team decided to donate it to the guild and split the contribution points. Everyone was doing their best to deal damage. Clove felt like the mood was good and felt happy in her heart. Only Crispy Bean was still pondering over how in the world it was possible for unrivaled Super Hottie's damage to be so high. From then on, Crispy Bean began paying attention to the damage chart and unrivaled Super Hottie's moves. He adjusted his pulling method and put more effort into dealing damage. His adjustment produced results. Unrivaled Super Hottie's name stayed at 2nd place, unable to pass him. After killing off the last wave of monsters, the team reached the end of Bone Dragon Abyss to face off against the final boss of the dungeon, Bone Dragon Alton. Alton used to be a red dragon, but after dying it became a bone dragon. Most of his stats had already changed, such as Dragon's Might. "Report your spirit," Clove asked everyone before the final boss. As Heavenly Domain players, they knew why she asked about their spirit. Because as long as one was against a dragon, Dragon's Might would take effect. If a player's spirit didn't reach a certain level, the player would be affected by Dragon's Might. According to the game, the player would feel threatened by the dragon and be unable to display his or her full strength. When this happened, the character's stats would weaken depending on the level of Dragon's Might and the character's spirit. Alton was a bone dragon. As an undead creature, it had lost much of its dragon abilities. Even though it still had Dragon's Might, it couldn't compare to other dragons. In front of Alton, players could accumulate enough spirit to negate the effects of its Dragon's Might. The game didn't announce the data to the public, but players had already figured it out. Heavenly Domain players weren't noobs. Before running a dungeon, they would look at a dungeon guide. They had known the boss was a dragon. They reported their spirit stat. All of them had reached a level where they could ignore the effects of Dragon's Might. This was the benefit of standing on the shoulders of giants. At release, Alton had been an extremely difficult boss to beat. The Bone Dragon made every player's head hurt. "It looks like everyone prepared well," Clove notified everyone before the run about this issue. It had only been a reminder, though. Actually getting the equipment to meet the requirements wasn't something that could be done just by thinking about it. However, it looked like everyone had prepared well and worn proper equipment that could ignore Alton's Dragon's Might. Speaking of this, Bone Dragon Abyss was already considered outdated, so their equipment didn't need to be amazing. Of course. The team replied. Clove followed. "However, negating Alton's Dragon Might isn't everything. Be mindful of his attacks. You all might have read the dungeon guide, but I should still talk about it again. First is his bite attack. It's a single target attack. Before attacking, Alton will lower its head. The attack has a range of 12 units and does lots of damage. The attack also has a chance to inflict a level 70 bleed. Be careful of his bite, especially cloth armor classes. If you get bitten, drink a potion immediately." "Understood," the 2 cloth armor characters replied. There's also his wing attack. Alton will lift its wings and attack. The starting animation is very obvious, but it's not so easy to predict because of the many ways it can use the attack. There are different ways of dodging and different safe spots every time. It's not easy to describe. Just make sure to be on the lookout for it. In addition, Alton has a tail attack, which can be used in many ways. It can do a horizontal sweep, whip strike, or a stab. The horizontal sweep has a wide range, making it difficult to dodge. However, if you predict it, you can dodge it. As for the whip strike, it's more flexible than the horizontal sweep, so be mindful of it. As for the stab, it has a quick starting animation and is difficult to see. The stab is the most difficult to deal with. Try not to stay too close to each other to minimize the damage taken. Finally, Alton has a breath attack. The breath attack covers a reverse triangle area. The area isn't fixed. The bigger the area, the longer the startup animation will be. However, the power is always the same. Besides the fixed damage, it will also lower your health by 50% and lasts 10 seconds. This effect cannot be dispelled and is very troublesome. If you get hit while at 50% health, it's possible that you will die in one hit, so if you get hit by his breath attack, immediately leave the range of battle and wait until the effect wears off before going back in. What if the tank gets hit? Someone asked. The tank would certainly be directly facing the boss. It would be difficult for the tank to avoid such a wide area breath attack. If the tank left the battlefield, the boss would follow him. Normally, this boss requires a secondary tank. When the main tank is hit by the breath attack, the secondary tank will take the aggro. However, we don't need one. Crispy Bean can hold on even with half his health, so you don't need to worry, Clove said. Okay. Everyone understood and paid their respects to Crispy Bean. Crispy Bean had been waiting for this moment and gave his thanks. Afterwards, Clove explained the strategy. Once the team finished resting, they started the fight. Crispy Bean was naturally the first to charge forward. At the same time, he didn't forget to look around him. Sure enough, unrivaled Super Hottie had followed him. At this point, everyone knew he wouldn't mess up the aggro, so Crispy Bean couldn't say anything about his actions. However, the final boss wasn't a mini-boss. It had tricky attacks, and besides its bite attack, it didn't have any other single target skills. When it attacked the tank, it would definitely attack the others at the same time. Right now, Crispy Bean really hoped this guy would be sent into outer space by Bone Dragon Alton's tail. Crispy Bean used a strong aggro skill to pull the boss. A green glow shone from the two black eyes of Bone Dragon Alton. It lowered its head and chomped at Crispy Bean. Crispy Bean had prepared. He raised his shield and blocked the giant fangs. Just like this, he blocked the attack. Due to the shield, the bleed effect wouldn't take effect. This was one usage of a shield. He took out his sword and attacked the dragon's head. Metal collided with bone, producing an ear-piercing noise. The sound was so bad, Crispy Bean couldn't help but furrow his brow. At this moment, a figure came descending from the sky. With two hands holding a huge axe, he slammed the axe into the dragon's head before it could pull out. The ear-piercing sound was so loud it made Crispy Bean shiver. Unrivaled Super Hottie's brave strike was like an attack towards his spirit. Bone Dragon Alton pulled back its head and flapped its two wings. At nearly the same time, Crispy Bean and Unrivaled Super Hottie rushed forward together below the Bone Dragon. This was a safe space, where the Bone Dragon's wings wouldn't be able to reach. However, with both knights running in, the space was a little bit narrow. Don't get in my way. Whenever Crispy Bean saw this annoying guy and his annoying name, he would feel extremely agitated. Ye Xiu didn't reply. After the Bone Dragon flapped its wings, he immediately rushed out of the safe space. Aha, you stupid noob, go die. Seeing this scene, Crispy Bean was delighted. After the bone wings went out, the bone wings would certainly retract, and the retraction would also do damage. Rushing out now was still too early. This was a mistake numerous players made against the boss. Careful. Clove saw the scene and immediately gave a warning. The King's Avatar, Chapter 555. Chapter 555 Knights spirit a decer like Ye Xiu, who could attack relentlessly without having the aggro go off the tank. Might draw some jealousy from other DPS players, but he was definitely loved by the team leader, tanks, and healing classes. However, in this current team, The one who hated this D-Sir the most was a tank. Crispy Bean was dressed in a set of superior equipment. Regardless of whether the aggro went off the tank because of DPS or having another DPS surpass his own damage output, he would find it shameful. However, this DPS was so outstanding that it caused Crispy Bean heart to tremble. He could already feel that unrivaled Super Hottie hadn't made the aggro go off the tank because of his control. It is only because of that control that unrivaled Super Hottie's current output damage was below Crispy Bean's. If this was a D-Sir whose role was to deal damage, the two shameful things would have already happened. An excellent D-Sir should have decreased the pressure that would be placed on the tank, but instead Crispy Bean felt as if his pressure multiplied. He wished that unrivaled Super Hottie would hurry and die. Now his wish would finally happen. Unrivaled Super Hottie unexpectedly chose this opportunity to rush out and misposition himself. Clove yelled out for him to be careful, but Crispy Bean knew clearly that if he reacted to the warning now, it would definitely be too late. Forwards, backwards, left, or right. No matter which way he went, it would be impossible to be faster than Alton's wing attack. Die, die, die. Crispy Bean couldn't express his excitement out loud, so he could only speak it continually in his heart. In the blink of an eye, the retracting wing already covered unrivaled Super Hottie. He could hear a faint clashing sound. What a great sound to hear. Originally, Crispy Bean hated the clashing sound between bones and metal, but at this moment he found the sound very pleasant. Alton's bone wing finally fully retracted. Crispy Bean couldn't wait to take a look at the results. The sight of unrivaled Super Hottie rolling on the ground from the sweep of the bone wing would be humiliating. After Alton retracted its wing, it turned its body and swept its tail towards them. Not bad, just like this. Crispy Bean was excited. He knew clearly that with a knight's toughness, a wing attack was not enough to instantly kill, but the addition of a tail sweep would be just enough. After all, this was a dungeon for 10 people, and unrivaled Super Hottie's equipment was poor even with the Dragon Guardian axe. However, because he used this double-handed weapon, he didn't have a shield. Speaking of defense, there was a significant difference between having a shield and not having a shield. At this moment, Crispy Bean was afraid Clove would heal him. However, Crispy Bean already thought about it before. Right at the moment when unrivaled Super Hottie made a mistake in positioning, Crispy Bean also made a little mistake in positioning. Thus, he also entered the wing attack's range. Crispy Bean pretended not to notice and didn't block with his shield. There was only one cleric on the team. For a situation like this, it was obvious whether one should prioritize the tank or the D-Sir. Crispy Bean admired himself for being able to plan so much in a single moment. When he saw his health gradually recover, Crispy Bean revealed a dark smile. As expected, Clove chose to heal him in this instant. At the same time, Alton's tail swept towards unrivaled Super Hottie. In fact, the boss's current aggro was still on Crispy Bean, so its attack was aimed at Crispy Bean. However, unrivaled Super Hottie positioned himself there, so he became the first person to receive the attack. Crispy Bean, of course, would hate to miss this scene. His unblinking eyes stared towards the direction of unrivaled Super Hottie. He even continued to scheme evilly. If this tail didn't manage to sweep unrivaled Super Hottie to death, then. Just as Crispy Bean reached this thought, his brain suddenly halted for a moment. This was because he saw unrivaled Super Hottie rolling around. Without any delay, he lay prone and slipped through the only gap as the dragon swept its tail across. Unrivaled Super Hottie stopped right behind Alton. As he stood up, he swung his Dragon Guardian axe in an arc. After straightening up, he continued to use all sorts of attacking skills. He completed all of the movements in one go. Once everything replayed and connected together, his previous act of continuous rolling became less humiliating. Just from the scene where he lay prone through the gap under the tail's sweep was thrilling enough to be recorded, watched, and replayed for 100 times. How is this possible? Crispy Beans couldn't close his gaping mouth. This had to be a coincidence. Crispy Bean thought. This was because under normal circumstances, it would have been too late to use such a method of dodging. However, at that time, Unrivaled Super Hotties was already rolling because of the wing attack. The speed of his roll was faster than what could be done by players. He was able to complete such a risky dodge by borrowing the speed generated from being hit by the wing attack. Crispy Bean hoped it was just a coincidence, but unfortunately it didn't seem like it. After rolling, Unrivaled Super Hottie continued to attack. He was absolutely calm. Who would believe that he was able to escape from such a desperate situation through luck? It was certain that calmness originated from confidence. He was confident that he could dodge the attack, so that chain of rolling wasn't a coincidence. He deliberately used Alton's wing attack to position himself. A method like this actually existed. Crispy Bean's mental pressure grew. How about the others? They were also struck dumb with astonishment by this scene. Ye Xiu's Unrivaled Super Hottie continued his attacks at once after rolling. The other members froze for a moment in awe. Even Clove, who was meant to quickly heal Unrivaled Super Hottie, was shocked stiff for a second. That was so close. Clove exasperated while healing Unrivaled Super Hottie after she broke out of her shock. "Ha ha, it's good to have a priest," Ye Xiu said as he continued to attack. As Crispy Bean watched Unrivaled Super Hottie slowly recover his health, he gnashed his teeth in anger, but he couldn't come up with any calculations. Don't tell me that I have to finish this dungeon quietly like this. I refuse. Crispy Bean looked around to see if there were any other chances, but Unrivaled Super Hottie positioned himself behind Alton. Between the two, one of them faced the dragon's front and the other faced its back. The bone dragon's body was not small. He couldn't even see Unrivaled Super Hottie in person, so how could he make any further calculations? Crispy Bean continued to fight the boss half-heartedly. On the contrary, other people were passionate like fire. Especially those who had received weapons from Bone Dragon, Abyss threw out damage ruthlessly. They wanted to leave the others behind and get closer to their targets ahead. For a moment, the competition in the damage charts was in full swing as the players competed with one another. Only the rankings of Crispy Bean in first place, Unrivaled Super Hottie in the second, and Clove in last place were stable. The other 7 people competed with one another like a race car match. However, 2 groups formed between the 7 people, those with and without dropped weapons. However, Crispy Bean wasn't in the mood to care what happened below him on this list. There was only one name in his eyes: Unrivaled Super Hottie. This fellow's name continued to hang behind him steadily from start to finish. It seemed as if he would surpass Crispy Bean at any time. Crispy Bean didn't have any methods to getting rid of Unrivaled Super Hottie, so he could only grit his teeth and try to crush Unrivaled Super Hottie under his name. However, no matter how he fought, he still wasn't able to pull away from him on the damage charts. Unrivaled Super Hottie was like a cat catching a mouse. The cat wanted to catch the mouse, but would restrain itself and patiently follow behind as if teasing the prey. Crispy Bean's eyes were close to spewing fire. His emotions surged as his performance became more and more chaotic. He would only consider which skill's damage output was greatest and immediately chose to use it. However, would his total damage rapidly shoot up from blindly using skills with high damage? Of course not. In order to have a higher damage output, apart from optimizing skill cooldowns, one had to take note of random effects triggered by the skill or extending buffs given by skills. Just standing there and putting out skills, that would be the legendary brainless DPS. True experts at dealing damage might not have it easier than a tank in terms of technique. The reason Crispy Bean had high DPS was because he had good equipment, but he still continued to grind his teeth and brood about the damage output. He also continued to try making different adjustments. Not only did his damage output become unstable, even his responsibility of keeping the boss's aggro was influenced. He was only focused on competing with Ye Xiu. He failed to realize that the other players at this moment were also competing, and it became more and more intense. The damage output increased and the boss's aggro also whirled up. Moreover, they trusted him as the chief tank, so they had completely forgotten about controlling the boss's aggro. Crispy Bean was still grinding his teeth and playing as both DPS and a tank though. Suddenly, the bone dragon turned its body. Its pair of pitch-dark eye sockets changed to glare at another target instead. The aggro is off the tank. Clove turned pale with fright and yelled out continually. The other 7 D-Sirs had already roughly grasped the set pattern of attacking the boss. Amidst their risky thrills with no danger, they had become extremely excited about their competition. They never thought that with unrivaled super hottie so high up, that they would be responsible for causing the aggro to go off the tank. At this instant, the person who caused the aggro shift secretly felt satisfied in his heart. This was actually the mindset of many DPS players. To cause the aggro shift was something they were proud of instead of feeling ashamed about. They believed that this was a proof of their mighty DPS. There was nothing wrong with thinking like this. It was true that causing an aggro shift meant having a high damage output, but there was not much else to it. Having high damage output did not necessarily mean that they were an expert in dealing damage. Having a high damage output could perhaps only be because of their equipment. On the other hand, experts in dealing damage could have a high result of damage output, while not letting there be any bothersome problems like causing an aggro shift. The brothers who chuckled to themselves only had time to feel accomplished for a moment before Alton turned around. The dragon's head raised as it tore through to bite towards them. However, at this time, a bright light shone from behind Alton as unrivaled super hottie already rushed ahead at a fast pace. He raised his hand to beckon and used a provoke towards Alton at this crucial moment. No, this was not a normal provoke, this was glorious provocation. At this moment, unrivaled super hottie's body was flooded with white light. He activated the Knight's level 50 awakening skill, Knight's Spirit. Humility, honor, sacrifice, bravery, mercy, honesty, spiritual justice. With the buff from Knight's Spirit, the Knight would have enhanced skills and a massive buff in Stats the King's Avatar Chapter 556. Chapter 556. Sacrificial Roar Provoke was considered a crowd control skill. Its effect could generate a huge amount of aggro, while causing the taunted target to lose its free movement. It could only attack the character who had cast Provoke for the next 3 seconds. Unrivaled Super Hottie activated his Knight's Spirit, which caused his Provoke to be enhanced to a glorious provocation. It generated even more aggro and would increase the forced attacks towards the caster to 5 seconds. There were many NPCs that were immune to Provoke, but Bone Dragon Alton wasn't one of them. After getting provoked by unrivaled Super Hottie, its attention shifted towards him instead of towards the other players. Using such a skill in the event of an accident was what a MT would usually do. Crispy Bean was very adept with such methods. The problem was that his Provoke was still on cooldown when it had happened. Provoke wasn't a skill that would normally be used frequently. It was reserved for dire situations. Crispy Bean had intended to build up aggro while dealing damage. For his own convenience, he used his skills as soon as the skills went off cooldown. The usage of such skills would be able to stabilize the boss's aggro, but this method overlooked the possibility of an aggro shift, and there was no backup plan either. The problem occurred because Crispy Bean had no intentions of stabilizing the aggro. Instead, his intentions were to compensate the skills, which would generate aggro gradually, with skills that would generate a tremendous amount of aggro in one go to make way for skills that had higher damage output. This was the main reason he failed to stabilize the aggro, despite casting all of his skills. Even though his high damage generated a large amount of aggro, the calculation for aggro was very complex. Damage wasn't the only thing that was factored in. Critical attacks, bleed, poison, and armor break. Each effect would generate additional aggro. As a result, Crispy Bean's way of building aggro couldn't make up for the aggro generated by players that were furiously attacking the boss. He didn't have a backup plan either. He was lucky that Unrivaled Super Hottie had reacted in time. When Bone Dragon Alton shifted its attention to Unrivaled Super Hottie, the players let out a collective sigh of relief. Unrivaled Super Hottie's equipment had also changed. He was facing Alton directly with a sword and shield in hand. "Stop attacking," Clove shouted as she healed Unrivaled Super Hottie at the same time. Even though the boss aggro had been stabilized after being provoked, there were still a lot of hidden dangers. If the aggro wasn't built up properly during the 3 to 5 second margin that the boss was provoked, there was no telling how the aggro would be distributed once provoke ended. Under normal circumstances, if the main tank did his or her work properly and stabilized the aggro within the 3 to 5 second window, the boss's aggro would be reset back onto the main tank. The reason others would stop attacking was to give the main tank a chance to build up the boss's aggro again. Crispy Bean was the only one who ignored the orders to stop. He wanted to use his own provoke to get the boss back to him, but unfortunately, it was on cooldown, so he had to resort to using other aggro building skills, and hope that Alton's aggro would be onto him once the effects of provoke wore off. Who would have thought that when he swung his word, the only thing he hit was air? Bone Dragon Alton had actually twisted its body and sidestepped the sword. Despite its big size, the dragon wasn't slow at all. It managed to dodge Crispy Bean's attack. If it was just this, Crispy Bean would have certainly shouted in anger, but Alton's sudden movement not only caused his own attack to miss, but the attacks of the others to miss as well. These were the players who were unable to stop their attacks when Clove barked out her order. Unrivaled Super Hottie had moved around after casting the provoke on Alton, and the dragon moved in an attempt to attack him. With that very movement, it dodged the attacks that were aimed at it. This was undoubtedly a mainstream main tank strategy. When situation got out of hand, the MT would drag the boss out of range from the other players. After all, not everyone was fast enough to immediately stop attacking. Unrivaled Super Hottie's action was a textbook maneuver. Crispy Bean would have done the same thing himself. Unfortunately, this maneuver had caused his attack to miss, so he was still deeply resentful. Bang! Crispy Bean's position was off and his vision was blocked by the Bone Dragon. He couldn't see the skill cast by Unrivaled Super Hottie. All he heard was a thud, which was the sound of a shield being struck. Was he defending or was he continuing to build aggro? Crispy Bean was panicking. As a knight, he knew that a majority of the skills that required shields could generate a large amount of aggro. This was also a way for main tanks to build up monster aggro. Was Unrivaled Super Hottie doing all of this in an attempt to replace him as the main tank? How could that be okay? Crispy Bean was becoming desperate. He moved forward and hacked away at the Bone Dragon. He really hoped he could see Alton's bony skull again after the 5-second glorious provocation wore off. The 5 seconds passed quickly. Crispy Bean was so focused on attacking Alton that he even repositioned himself in front of the boss. He had been counting down from 5, and when the time came, bang! Crispy Bean was sent flying into the air. The dragon had caught Crispy Bean in the air with its tail. Crispy Bean coughed up blood. The aggro was back on him, but in a very pathetic way. He had been too careless. The aggro reset meant that the boss would resume its attack on him, but Crispy Bean forgot that the dragon's attack range had a 360 degrees reach. It didn't need to face its target to attack. As a result, the instant the provoke off, Alden lifted its wings. The others were already standing far away after stopping their attacks. Only Crispy Bean was standing behind Alden, expecting it to turn around. In the end, he was sent flying away by Alden's wing. The dragon followed up with a swing of its tail. Wing attack, tail whip. Crispy Bean was helpless against Alden's combo. He could only block the attack with his shield and prepared to counterattack as soon as he landed on the ground. With the aggro back on him, he could withstand a few of Alden's attacks, especially with Clove healing him. Bang! With another dull thud, the dragon's tail struck Crispy Bean. He had already prepared his shield in front of him, but the impact accelerated him towards the ground. Crispy Bean was well prepared, though, and had already began quick recovering. However, he suddenly heard the D-Sirs let out a collective curse. SHT. Crispy Bean's eyes began to water. Alden finally turned around, but its next animation made Crispy Bean cry. Dragon Breath. Alden was going to use its strongest attack, Dragon Breath. The dragon ignored Crispy Bean when it was supposed to and shifts its attention to him when it wasn't. If anybody laughed at an NPC's intelligence level, Crispy Bean would definitely give that person a heavy slap. The worst part of the breath attack was that it was aimed in the direction of the damage dealers. The attack would hit everyone else. If every one of them were hit by the breath attack, they were finished. Alden displayed a high level of intelligence. With such AI attacks, wouldn't it finish the lot of them off in an instant? Crispy Bean recognized the seriousness of the situation. How could the damage dealers not notice it? But evasion was impossible. They was quite a distance away from Alden, placing them right in the center of its breath. There was nowhere to run. As for the cleric, she was also a target that would be attacked. As all hope was lost, a roar emanated from behind Alden. It wasn't man-made. It was a skill called Roar, but with Night Spirit's buff active at the same time, it was known as Sacrificial Roar. Glory players gave a nickname to this skill based on its special effect, Shoot at Me. Roar was a skill of similar nature to Provoke. While Provoke was a single target skill, Roar would often be used on a mob. A Sacrificial Roar, buffed by Night Spirit, had an increased range. With an increase in range, the number of targets affected would also increase. With the concentrated attacks from so many enemies, the Roar was indeed sacrificial. Roar didn't have a time limit. It affected its target based on the number of attacks launched. It would force victims to launch a single attack on the caster alone. In their current situation, though, one hit was enough. Breath was a continuous attack despite dealing accumulated damage. It still counted as one hit. But could unrivaled Super Hottie survive under the continuous damage of the Dragon Breath? He wasn't Crispy Bean, who had superior equipment. With the quality of his equipment, he would normally need a secondary tank to take the hit. Every one of the players couldn't help but worry for unrivaled Super Hottie when Alden breathed towards him. Sacrificial Roar. Would he really be sacrificed? The King's Avatar, Chapter 557, Chapter 557. The arrogant youth whose face was slapped after being hit by another strong attack. Alden twisted its neck furiously. Dragon Breath continued to spew out like water from a hose. The ashen dragon breath swept past the dumbfounded team of players and headed straight for unrivaled Super Hottie. A shadow swiftly dashed out. It was unrivaled Super Hottie. He was running away from the dragon breath in a clockwise direction. As a result, the others looked like they were watching a scene from an action movie. The ashen dragon breath chased close behind him. 4 steps, 3 steps, 2 steps away. It was about to swallow unrivaled Super Hottie, but at this moment the dragon breath faded away and unrivaled Super Hottie came out safe and sound. DMN, everyone else shouted. Before this, they had been crying in despair at Alton's dragon breath. This time they were crying out in joy, seeing unrivaled super hottie escaping from the dragon's breath in such a manner. "He really is unrivaled," someone remarked. "Too cool. What a hottie." Everyone was praising him, completely stunned by unrivaled super hottie's performance. Then they heard unrivaled super hottie yell, "Heal!" "Oh," Clove hastily responded and healed him. After the sacrificial roar, the boss cleansed itself from the forced taunt, but it was still attacking unrivaled super hottie. Sacrificial roar clearly had a huge aggro value, so Alton's aggro was now on unrivaled super hottie. Bang, 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 bang. After a few quick attacks, unrivaled super hottie shouted out again. "Attack!" The DPS classes replied and quickly rushed forward. Crispy Bean felt like he had been forgotten. No, he hadn't been completely forgotten. When the others rushed forward, some of them were whispering to each other about him. The Berserker actually said if Crispy Bean had run like unrivaled super hottie, wouldn't the problem have been resolved faster? Crispy Bean really wanted to curse the Berserker. "Are you an idiot? I was in the air at that time. Do you think I can just grow wings and fly around?" Crispy Bean didn't say it though because he knew that was just an excuse. At that moment, even if he had landed on the ground steadily, there was no way he had that sort of awareness. Even if he had that sort of awareness, it didn't mean that he could react in such a manner. Even if he were able to react in that manner, it didn't mean that he would be able to perform such precise moves. He hadn't been on the ground but in the air. During his moment of panic, he had even forgotten to quick recover and crash to the ground. How many of them had laughed at him? Why couldn't he do it? Crispy Bean ground his teeth. His heart was filled with envy and resentment. Because he had been sent flying far away, sacrificial roar wouldn't be enough to consolidate the aggro. Right now, the aggro had been completely locked onto unrivaled super hottie. However, how could he give up? Definitely not. Crispy Bean thought. He chased after the DPS classes and also attacked. Crispy Bean relentlessly used strong damage skills and aggro skills. However, Alton refused to turn its head. Crispy Bean's heart trembled. His gaze had already paused on a few skills several times already. Provoke, Roar, Knight's Spirit. He could use all of these skills too. In addition, if he used them, the skills would be effective. The Bone Dragon would be forced to attack him for a few seconds. However, with the aggro already stabilized, if he suddenly used these skills, it wouldn't be any different than the aggro being dragged from the tank. The others would definitely scorn him. As a tank, Crispy Bean hated tank-related accidents. If he intentionally caused one, he would be violating the respect he had for his class. As a result, he decided not to use these two skills. Using such methods and using attacks in order to take back the aggro were very different. With his equipment, he didn't need to use Provoke or Roar to gain back the aggro. Crispy Bean's superior equipment became his pride. He continued to attack Alden. This time, he was completely prepared and picked a good position. If the aggro returned to him, it wouldn't matter what attack the Bone Dragon used. None of them would be able to send him flying away. "Come back! Come back! Come back!" Crispy Bean roared. He obviously wouldn't let unrivaled super hottie tell him to stop outputting damage, otherwise he would lose face. He could only do his best and hope all the way until Bone Dragon Alton fell. What? It died, just like that. Crispy Bean couldn't believe it. It only took that much time. How much health did Alton have? Why wasn't it fighting properly? He hadn't gotten the aggro back, so why did it fall? He hadn't accumulated enough aggro. Crispy Bean could only flip open the damage charts. He had actually dropped down to number 2. What type of joke was this? Even though he had initially been prioritizing establishing aggro, unrivaled super hottie had switched out his Dragon Guardian axe and had to balance between putting out damage and establishing aggro. How did he lose in terms of damage? Crispy Bean couldn't believe what was going on. Seeing how happy the other team members were, including Clove, Crispy Bean couldn't help but feel like he really had been abandoned. Leader, what we get? The team wanted to know what the boss had dropped. It's something someone in our team can use. Guess, Clove began to tease the others. Is it a weapon? Someone asked. Yes, Clove replied. Wow, what luck, this isn't an abyss, it's a weapon storage, someone joked. Everyone laughed. Leader, stop playing with us. Hurry up and show us the weapon. Clove stopped dawdling and let everyone see the weapon in the chat. It was a striker glove. Amidst everyone else's envious gaze, the glove was given to the striker. The atmosphere was very warm. Shall we continue? Clove asked. In the heavenly domain, dungeons had a run limit. Bone Dragon Abyss could only be run twice a day. Continue, continue, everyone shouted. I have something that came up. I won't be able to continue. Crispy Bean suddenly spoke up. Okay, good luck. Clove didn't try and stop him. After seeing unrivaled Super Hottie's performance, she didn't feel like Crispy Bean was necessary. Of course, she had good intentions too. For someone at Crispy Bean's level, this dungeon was a waste of time, so Clove didn't want to trouble Crispy Bean. As for the mistake at the final boss, Clove didn't have too many thoughts about it. Everyone made mistakes, no. At crucial moments, the off-tank often made up for it. Crispy Bean didn't think such simple thoughts, though. His arrogance made him unable to accept what had happened. Clove not stopping him suddenly made him feel very unhappy. Without saying anything more, Crispy Bean left the team and directly left without saying goodbye to anyone. Clove was busy attending to the team when she suddenly received a message from her guild leader. Senior, exterminate the heavens. Crispy Bean says he wants to leave the guild. What happened? What? Clove was at a loss. Didn't he come help you clear the dungeon? Senior, exterminate the heavens asked. Yeah. Did something go wrong? Senior, exterminate the heavens questioned. Nothing went wrong. Clove was confused. In the eyes of normal players, the run had gone very smoothly apart from the minor slip-up at the final boss. It wasn't like anyone died, no. Did he get into an argument with anyone? Senior, exterminate the heavens asked. What did he say to you? Clove asked back. If that were the reason, then it might be because of unrivaled Super Hottie. In the beginning, Clove could also tell that Crispy Bean didn't like him, but she didn't think he had such a big problem with him. Then again, in the beginning, he had said unrivaled Super Hottie was a leech, but after playing seriously, he became number one on the damage charts. Crispy Bean had looked down on him as a tank, but unrivaled Super Hottie later showed incredible skill as a tank. There shouldn't have been any problems. Clove thought from a bystander's perspective. She hadn't thought about it from Crispy Bean's perspective. Unrivaled Super Hottie took number one on the damage charts and then displayed incredible skill at a crucial moment, which made him feel like he couldn't show his face. This was a story of an arrogant youth being slapped in the face. I asked what was wrong, but he said he didn't want to say it. Senior, exterminate the heavens sent a helpless reply. A normal guild member didn't matter, but a tank was different, especially the guild's chief tank. He was a huge pillar for the guild. I'll ask him. Clove didn't feel happy about Crispy Bean's weird attitude. She was quite close with Crispy Bean too, so she asked directly, I heard you want to leave the guild. What's wrong? It has nothing to do with you, so don't ask. Crispy Bean replied quickly. Everything was good before, but after running a dungeon with me, you want to leave the guild. How does this not have something to do with me? Clove asked. Crispy Bean didn't reply. Is it because of unrivaled Super Hottie? Clove asked. Even though she didn't understood Crispy Bean's thinking, unrivaled Super Hottie was the most likely reason behind it. Yeah, Crispy Bean admitted. Why? Clove didn't understand. No reason. I don't want to be in the same guild as him. Crispy Bean couldn't say the truth. What's wrong with you? Clove wasn't happy, but was also too lazy to deal with Crispy Bean. She had found the reason, so she told Senior, exterminate the heavens. Because of that, what exactly happened in the dungeon? Senior, exterminate the heavens asked the King's Avatar Chapter 558, Chapter 558. Test. Clove was an honest person. She described everything that had happened between Crispy Bean and unrivaled Super Hottie without adding in any flourishes. Clover couldn't understand Crispy Bean's feelings, but Senior Exterminate the Heavens immediately grasped the problem. Even so, there was nothing he could do. This issue was clearly a matter of face and wasn't something that could be solved through logic. Unrivaled Super Hottie hadn't done anything wrong. Even if he had, what was he supposed to do? Call him over and make him apologize to Crispy Bean? This was a game. Face was even more important than one's life. At worst, everyone separated. No one wanted to lower their heads to someone else. Even if it wasn't logical, one should still stand up straight and take it. Apologize. For what reason would he need to? Because he was a tank. Face had nothing to do with being a tank. Senior Exterminate the Heavens thought about it. If he wanted to resolve this problem, he had to figure out a way to get Crispy Bean out of this embarrassing situation. Unrivaled Super Hottie couldn't get him out. It seemed like it was all up to him. How depressing. Senior Exterminate the Heavens was also troubled. Unless he was a famous money warrior or was backed by a club, a normal guild leader didn't have much status in the game. If a conflict came about, the guild leader better get busy. If the guild leader succeeded, then it would be worth it. The worst-case scenario would be if the conflict didn't get resolved. The guild leader would have to find outside help, which would really be quite depressing. Senior Exterminate the Heavens sighed and sent a message to Crispy Bean. Crispy Bean, we've already played together for so long. You plan on leaving the guild, but you didn't even give us a reason. That's not right. When the other members of the guild ask why Crispy Bean left, what am I supposed to tell them? You're our guild's chief tank. Senior Exterminate the Heavens pretended he didn't know the reason whatsoever. His words suggested three things. First, he played the emotional card, making Crispy Bean recall his fond memories with the guild. Crispy Bean's reason for leaving was very simple. If he had to reason with Crispy Bean, his only choice would be strike at Unrivaled Super Hottie. But if Unrivaled Super Hottie became dissatisfied with the guild too, the damage would be irreversible. Right now, it was only because he was unhappy with Unrivaled Super Hottie. As long as his feelings didn't intensify, Crispy Bean would certainly feel reluctant if he left his guild and his friends in the guild. The second thing was to tell Crispy Bean about his own problems. This would give Crispy Bean a way out. Crispy Bean was hesitating, but he could excuse himself by saying it was to help him. As for the third thing, it pointed out Crispy Bean's status. Senior Exterminate the Heavens completely saw through Crispy Bean's reason, so he emphasized his status to appeal to him. Senior Exterminate the Heavens was quite skilled. He wasn't an ordinary person. On the surface, he was a normal guild leader, but in reality, he was one of Tyrannical Ambition's core members. He was handling club matters by expanding their power. In other words, he was on the same level as the 10th server, Cold Knight, an experienced and trusted core member. The only difference was that his relationship with Tyrannical Ambition couldn't be exposed to the public. He could only protect Tyrannical Ambition's interests in secret. Senior Exterminate the Heavens placed great value on an MT, especially one like Crispy Bean. The core of a team couldn't only have good technical skills. The core had to be reliable. Tanks would usually be trained by the guild and would be treated well. If you just reaped the benefits and then slapped your butt as you left, how sad would that be? From this point, Crispy Bean being the chief tank was already a form of recognition. Senior Exterminate the Heavens was trying his best to mediate, but if worst came to worst, Crispy Bean would be his first priority. After Senior Exterminate the Heavens sent his message, Crispy Bean didn't reply for a long time. Senior Exterminate the Heavens had already reminded Clove not to interfere. Senior Exterminate the Heavens understood Clove's personality. If Clove tried to resolve this situation, she would definitely tell Crispy Bean that he was causing unnecessary trouble. This would clearly push Crispy Bean away from the guild, so he told Clove not to reveal the truth. Senior Exterminate the Heavens immediately told Clove to continue playing, while he dealt with the matter. Senior Exterminate the Heavens patiently waited for Crispy Bean to reply, but at the same time he saw Clove asking repeatedly in the guild chat if anyone wanted to go to Bone Abyss, but there was no reply from anyone. Senior Exterminate the Heavens suddenly had a thought and messaged Clove. "I'll go with you guys." "Huh, you're going?" Clove was surprised. "Isn't that night really good? I want to see for myself." Senior Exterminate the Heavens said. "Lower your damage output," Clove replied. "Of course," Senior Exterminate the Heavens said before running over to Bone Dragon Abyss. The 9 players in the team waited and waited until the guild leader arrived. The team was naturally very surprised. Even though normal guild leaders weren't celebrities or anything, they still had a higher status than a tank. The team members saw that today. The chief tank came to play with them in such a weak dungeon, and now the guild leader personally joined them. They suddenly felt like the guild's future looked very disastrous. "If everyone's here, shall we begin?" Senior Exterminate the Heavens greeted everyone and then laughed. "Let's go," Clove instructed. Even though the guild leader had come, she still led the team. The team entered the dungeon and began fighting. This time, the tank was naturally unrivaled Super Hottie. Senior Exterminate the Heavens didn't care about the others and paid attention to unrivaled Super Hottie's skill. A tank's proficiency could be seen through the tank's ability to pull monsters, but to truly see a tank's skill required the situation to be messy. The messier the situation was, the more a tank's ability to control the field would be displayed. As a result, Senior Exterminate the Heavens planned on making mistakes from time to time. For example, he would accidentally pull too many monsters, and then an accidental mistake to cause the monster's aggro to go off the tank. These types of mistakes happened often anyways. Senior Exterminate the Heavens had an excuse ready for his mistakes. He hadn't played the dungeon in a long time, so he forgot how many monsters he should be pulling. He pulled the aggro off the tank because his equipment was too amazing. His excuses were fairly reasonable. With his plan prepared, Senior Exterminate the Heavens immediately put it into action. "Ah, my bad. I haven't been here in a long time. Did they change the dungeon? There didn't used to be so monsters on this side." Senior Exterminate the Heavens cried as he brought a bunch of monsters with him. The other team members saw this scene, but he was the guild leader. What could they say? Hurry up and save him. Unrivaled Super Hottie was the most calm though. He directly ignored the guild leader's 3 monsters, allowing the monsters to attack the guild leader. All he said was, "Attack those 3. Guild leader, hang on." The implication, you become a tank for now. It wasn't logical according to common sense, especially because the team only had 1 cleric. However, Senior Exterminate the Heavens had good equipment, better than even Crispy Bean. Even though his defense couldn't compare to Crispy Bean's, if his equipment far surpassed the dungeon minimum requirement, then who cared? Damage was more important. Senior Exterminate the Heavens' health dropped fairly quickly, but the health of the monsters dropped even quicker. In the end, he hung on, while the 3 monsters all died. Unrivaled Super Hottie had only given them a glance to show his concern. Senior Exterminate the Heavens was depressed. He was too strong. The monsters he pulled along could be killed with him acting as a tank. If he pulled along any more monsters and even he couldn't deal with them, then Unrivaled Super Hottie wouldn't be able to either. It seemed like this method wouldn't work. Too few monsters and Unrivaled Super Hottie would have him take the role of a tank. Too many monsters and everyone would die. What was the point then? If that didn't work, then on to the second method. Senior Exterminate the Heavens was a striker, a pure DPS class, so he began attacking like crazy, but despite his efforts, no accident came about. Why was it so difficult to cause an accident? Senior Exterminate the Heavens persevered and continued to try and cause an accident, But before he could do so, the boss fell. Senior Exterminate the Heavens dominated the damage charts, but no accident occurred. Senior Exterminate the Heavens didn't need to test anymore, though. If no accident occurred, it could only mean one thing. Even under his brainless attacking, the tank was maintaining a stable aggro. This unrivaled super hottie had even better skills than Crispy Bean. What do you think? Isn't he pretty good? After the dungeon ended, Clove messaged Senior Exterminate the Heavens. Unrivaled super hottie hadn't made any mistakes in the dungeon run. He had done everything an outstanding tank needed to do. Quite impressive. Senior Exterminate the Heavens nodded his head. This unrivaled super hottie had surpassed his expectations. No wonder Crispy Bean felt pressured. If this person developed, he would certainly take Crispy Bean's position. Under normal circumstances, he would be extremely happy having such an outstanding player join the guild, but this time, the newly added player had a conflict with the chief tank of his guild. This wasn't an easy situation, easy to deal with. Crispy Bean had replied to him during the dungeon run. Senior Exterminate the Heavens' words had failed. Crispy Bean had a deep opinion on unrivaled super hottie. It's either me or him. Senior Exterminate the Heavens had already made up his mind long ago, but after witnessing unrivaled super hottie's strength, Senior Exterminate the Heavens felt a little hurt to be losing such a talent. From his guild's perspective, this person couldn't be kept, but as a branch of tyrannical ambition, it wouldn't be hard to make arrangements for him. Senior Exterminate the Heavens quickly contacted Tyrannical Ambition's guild leader, Ye Xiu, and told him of this incredible knight that had just joined the guild. However, because of a conflict with one of his players, he couldn't keep him in the guild, so he wanted to see if Ye Xiu could bring him over to another guild. Something like that happened. I'll make arrangements. What's his name? Ye Xiu asked. If Senior Exterminate the Heavens couldn't bear to abandon such a talent, then Ye Xiu wouldn't either. Unrivaled super hottie, Senior Exterminate the Heavens replied. This name, how arrogant, Ye Xiu said. It really is arrogant, but he has the skills to back it up. I just dungeoned with him. His control over aggro is incredible. I intentionally tried to cause accidents to see his skill, but I couldn't even do that. My equipment is far better than his too. That good. I'll hurry and make arrangements. Ye Xiu was moved the King's Avatar Chapter 559, Chapter 559. Tyrannical Ambitions, 4 branches. 1 could never have too many talents. When Ye Xiu heard Senior Exterminate the Heavens praise this knight, he also became interested. Getting him over reasonable was very easy. All he needed to do was send over an invite with Tyrannical Ambition's name. Tyrannical Ambition and Exterminate the Heavens were on 2 completely different levels. A glory player might not be a fan of the team, but the player definitely wouldn't reject a club guild's invite, unless the player was the type who didn't want to join a guild. However, if unrivaled super hottie had joined Exterminate the Heavens, he clearly wasn't that type of person. Ye Xiu was only worried if this person might have some sort of grudge against Team Tyranny. For example, if he were a fan of Excellent Era, then it was possible he would refuse an invite to Tyrannical Ambition. What details do you know about him? Ye Xiu asked Senior Exterminate the Heavens. I don't know. He just joined the guild today. According to him, he hasn't played the game in a while. Judging from his equipment, it seems to be true. Senior Exterminate the Heavens said. Ye Xiu didn't have much else to ask. He was just pondering whether this tank, who Senior Exterminate the Heavens thought highly of, had the qualifications for him to personally go out and invite him. After thinking about it for a bit, Ye Xiu decided to play it safe. Even though he trusted Senior Exterminate the Heavens, this tank and Senior Exterminate had only played together in one dungeon. Senior Exterminate certainly didn't dare guarantee this tank's ability. Without knowing exactly how deep this tank's skill went, if he invited him into the guild and he turned out to be sham, he would be laughed at. As a result, Jiang Yu found a branch guild leader and had him complete the task. Although it was only a branch guild, it was a guild that tyrannical ambition publicly acknowledged and could be considered a part of tyrannical ambition. The branch guild's strength couldn't be compared to the official tyrannical ambition, but it wasn't bad either. Otherwise, tyrannical ambition wouldn't be able to hold onto its image. Publicly acknowledged branch guilds would directly receive help from tyrannical ambition, so their resources weren't lacking. For normal players, jumping from a guild like Exterminate the Heavens to a club's branch guild could be considered a huge success. In-game affairs were always carried out very quickly. Not long afterwards, unrivaled Super Hottie received a guild invite. Seeing a personal invite from one of tyrannical ambition's branch guilds, Ye Xiu was quite dumbfounded. He didn't think things would develop so fast. He had only just joined Guild Exterminate the Heavens and ran 2 dungeons. He didn't think he had made enough of a commotion yet. Who would have thought he would be deemed good enough already? Even if he had ran a dungeon with the guild's chief tank, and then the guild leader senior Exterminate the Heavens as well, and received their recognition, Ye Xiu hadn't imagined he would receive a direct recommendation from tyrannical ambition so quickly. This truly was difficult for someone to imagine. If Crispy Bean hadn't made things difficult by showing his intent to leave the guild, even if Senior Exterminate the Heavens witnessed unrivaled Super Hottie's skills, he still wouldn't have immediately asked for a recommendation. Crispy Bean had forced him to make a decision. He didn't want to give up on Crispy Bean, but he also felt like unrivaled Super Hottie wasn't so simple. In order to not lose either of them, his only choice was to find a different way to get unrivaled Super Hottie to stay. After all, Senior Exterminate the Heavens' main goal was to help tyrannical ambition. Ye Xiu wasn't some godly immortal. How could he have known about all of this? Even if he had seen how unhappy Crispy Bean was towards him, they had only just gotten to know each other. How could Ye Xiu know Crispy Bean had so much pride and actually threatened the guild leader? Is this the basis for the saying gold will always shine? Ye Xiu said to Chen Guo. Chen Guo was speechless. Ye Xiu truly could be considered as gold, but she really didn't like how he called himself gold so calmly. Couldn't you let someone else say those words? So you're in. Chen Guo was also surprised. She sighed thinking of how much effort it had taken her to get into Excellent Dynasty. How infuriating. Chen Guo was still melancholy. Ye Xiu had already begun talking with the inviter. Ye Xiu directly inquired why they wanted him. This branch player couldn't say it was because of Jiang Yu. In the end, he could only say that he had a friend in Exterminate the Heavens who told him of his skill, which was why he hoped to see it for himself. Ha ha ha, could I ask who your friend is? He has very good eyes, Ye Xiu replied. Yes, yes. The other side was speechless. Seeing how arrogant this unrivaled Super Hottie was, he didn't want to chat with him any longer. Honestly speaking, he didn't like this sort of personality. Since you look so highly of me, I can't refuse, can I? We have to give each other face, don't you think so? Ye Xiu said. Yes, yes, yes. The other side really wanted to end this conversation. How should I do this? Should I leave the guild first? Have you arranged everything on your side? Ye Xiu asked. After leaving a guild, you have to wait 5 days before you can join another, but it doesn't matter. You can come dungeon with us during those 5 days, the branch player said. So there's something like that. Okay. Ye Xiu acted like he was reluctant, but then immediately left the guild. He came and left in a rush. During his time in Guild Exterminate the Heavens, the only thing that he had made an impression of to the guild members was his name. His incredible performance in the dungeon hadn't spread yet. No one really said much about him joining and leaving the guild so suddenly. However, the ones who had interacted with him before immediately noticed. Crispy Bean was naturally bursting with joy. Even though the guild leader never said anything directly, his intentions had been made clear. Crispy Bean acted like nothing had happened and didn't mention leaving the guild anymore. As for Senior Exterminate the Heavens, he had received a message from the branch guild saying the transaction had been successful. He was also satisfied. The only person who wasn't happy was the innocent girl, Clove. This girl saw the notification of unrivaled super hottie leaving the guild and immediately became somewhat upset. While complaining to Senior Exterminate the Heavens, she went to ask unrivaled super hottie. I didn't say anything. I'm still thinking about how to resolve this situation. Senior Exterminate the Heavens pretended like he didn't know what was going on. Then, why did he leave the guild without saying bye? Clove asked. How should I know? He didn't say bye to me either. Senior Exterminate the Heavens continued to put on his act. Clove didn't reply because she had already received a reply from unrivaled super hottie who told her someone from Tyrannical Ambition had invited him so he would be going to their guild. Clove stared blankly. Had she thought too much? It seemed like he left on his own accord. She didn't have anything else to say. Okay. Clove only replied with one word. If an opportunity comes up, we should dungeon together again. Ye Xiu replied. He had good impression of this girl. Sure, Clove replied. Ye Xiu didn't say anything else. The branch guild had already called him over to dungeon together. There were a lot of level 70 dungeons. It wasn't possible to run all of them in one day. The two sides found a place to meet. The branch guild also saw the severity of the situation when they saw unrivaled super hottie's equipment. Unrivaled super hottie's equipment wasn't any different from before. He had taken the Dragon Guardian axe in Bone Dragon Abyss, but after running the dungeon, he returned it to Clover and let the team deal with it. In the second run, no knight equipment dropped, so Ye Xiu hadn't gained anything from there either. Honestly speaking, Ye Xiu looked down on Bone Dragon Abyss's equipment even more than Crispy Bean. Even if he got equipment from Bone Dragon Abyss, so what? Would he appear any different in front of others? Tyrannical Ambitions, 4 branch guilds were much more powerful than Guild Exterminate the Heavens. The set of equipment on unrivaled super hottie was even more shocking to the branch guild than to Exterminate the Heavens. Tyrannical Ambitions branch guild had directly invited unrivaled super hottie to go into a 100-player group dungeon. They had originally planned on immediately adding unrivaled super hottie to the group to see how he would deal with an extremely difficult dungeon. But now from the looks of it with his equipment, he didn't even seem close to being qualified to entering the dungeon. Before adding unrivaled super hottie to the group, everyone was whispering to each other when they heard unrivaled super hottie laugh out loud. Wow, so many people are here to welcome me. You're all too nice. To tell you all the truth, I haven't officially joined the guild yet, so all of you should prepare another welcome party 5 days from now. Everyone was speechless. How could a guy with such a set of equipment act so arrogant? It seems like his name wasn't just for show. Everyone is here to run a dungeon. We just happen to only have 99 players and have an open spot. Are you interested in joining? The person speaking was their group leader, Happy Sheep, a cleric. He was one of the core members of Tyrannical Ambitions branch guild. He had been the one to invite unrivaled super hottie over. The branch guild leader hadn't gone to personally invite him either with the same reasoning as Jiang Yu. He didn't want to personally invite over a faulty product. Knowing this, under the guild leader's instructions, Happy Sheep was to pull him over to a dungeon and check his skill. As a result, Happy Sheep directly arranged a 100-player group and planned on bringing unrivaled super hottie along. But after seeing his equipment wasn't good enough for the dungeon. At this moment, the team chat was in a heated debate. A 100-player group, it can't get better than that. Which dungeon? Ye Xiu asked. Our group is planning on running the Tomb in the Sky. Happy Sheep answered. Tomb in the Sky, that sounds familiar. Wait 1 second, I'm going to check a guide. Ye Xiu said the King's Avatar Chapter 560, 100-player dungeon team, The 100-player dungeon was undoubtedly the largest scale dungeon type in the game. Naturally, the dungeon's difficulty would be higher than smaller scale dungeons. There was even a difference in difficulty between 100-player dungeons. For example, Tomb in the Sky, the dungeon Happy Sheep's group was planning on running, could only be considered moderate when with other 100-player dungeons. Although it wasn't too difficult, Happy Sheep's group had yet to complete it. They were still figuring out how to take down the dungeon. Equipment from 100-player dungeons weren't common because the dungeons could only be run a limited number of times. Compared to smaller dungeons, which could be run 3 times a day, each person could only enter a 100-player dungeon once per week. In addition, most couldn't clear the dungeon until the end. This was because within the dungeon, players only had 1 life and couldn't be revived by priests. Within a 100-player team, there's 1 less person every time a player died. So more and more players would be taken out gradually until there wasn't enough manpower. Naturally, by then, it would be impossible to clear the dungeon. However, the rewards for clearing a 100-player dungeon were given out differently than other dungeons, which only gave rewards for finishing the run. The rewards were based on the player's progress, so even if the whole team wiped out and failed to clear the dungeon, the team could still obtain rewards according to their progress percentage. This was why many ads to recruit people into their groups included their progress through the dungeon. As long as the player joining wasn't a first-timer in the heavenly domain, prospective players would have a good idea of the group's strength. For example, Happy Sheep's team had reached 88% completion for Tomb in the Sky. This percent was good enough to be boastful about for more than 95% of the players in the heavenly domain. Even though Happy Sheep was only investigating a moderately difficult 100-player dungeon, his group's strength could already be considered amazing. For guilds on a similar level as Guild Exterminate the Heavens, their teams had only just taken the first step at tackling level 100-player dungeons. As for guildless wild players, forming a random 100-player team was like buying the lottery. They would run through as much as they could. However, random groups taking down 100-player dungeons might only be possible if the group of players were level 70 and the dungeon was level 60. As a result, Happy Sheep's prideful team instantly boiled with anger when faced with a guy who immediately went to check a walkthrough after hearing the dungeon's name. Reading a guide, what does he think this is? A 5-man dungeon from the newbie village. Someone typed furiously in the group chat. If 100-player dungeons could be cleared by simply reading a walkthrough, then it wouldn't be so hard. Being able to fight a 100-player dungeon could be counted as a skill. It couldn't be learnt by reading walkthroughs once. It required hours and hours of practice. These people were able to clear 88% of Tomb in the Sky because they had gone through 9 weeks of repetition and hardship. They were only able to exchange their final grade after their skills matured and their equipment improved. Yet this guy just lightly wrote he was going to check a guide. It felt as though he were looking down on 100-player dungeons and felt quite offensive to listen to. He's probably never run a 100-player dungeon before, has he? How could a tank like this be any good? Some people spoke their doubts, blindly shooting off their mouths. In a normal player's eyes, those who believed that 100-player dungeons could be cleared by reading a simple walkthrough were noobs who had never fought in a 100-player dungeon and didn't know the difference between heaven and earth. Happy Sheep wasn't too happy either, but even though he was leading the team, he wasn't a guild leader-level core member. The matter had been reported to Jiang Yu by Senior Exterminate the Heavens. Then, Jiang Yu left the task to the branch guild leader, who gave the task to him. Unrivaled Super Hottie's origin had been lost during this process, so Happy Sheep didn't really know what responsibility he should take. The guild leader gave him an order and he had just accepted it out of convenience. After hearing unrivaled super hottie say, "I'm going to check a guide," he suddenly felt like this person was overestimating himself. Guild exterminate the heavens. Those who came from such a guild could only be so skilled. Happy Sheep thought, but because he had accepted the task from the guild leader, he couldn't not do it. Thus, he could only patiently wait for him to look over his guide. At the same time, he looked at the chat to see the others laughing at him. He didn't intend on stopping them. The guide for this 100-player dungeon would take a very long time to carefully read. Happy Sheep decided to start the pre-dungeon meeting. The meeting would discuss their mistakes in the previous run and what could be fixed, but not long after starting the meeting, unrivaled Super Hottie's voice drifted over. "Okay, I'm done reading. When do we start?" Happy Sheep checked the clock. It had only been 10 minutes. He immediately became furious again. 100-player dungeons were complicated. First of all, the dungeon itself was complex. Secondly, because the team consisted of 100 players, the class composition was very complicated. Not a single walkthrough covered everything because all of them used teams with different classes. Because of this, many people compared several guides before considering them as a guide, making the guides even more complicated. So 10 minutes. He probably didn't even get to the first boss, did he? Happy Sheep didn't say anything when the team chat erupted. "How long have you been looking at a guide?" 10 minutes. That's 1 minute for each boss. Does he think this is a normal small-scale dungeon? In normal small-scale dungeons, the difficulty was mostly concentrated on the boss, so the important parts for these types of dungeons were the bosses. However, in 100-player dungeons, the mobs were all at a level similar to smaller-scale dungeon bosses. When looking at a guide, the player couldn't only look at the bosses. Unrivaled Super Hottie said he had finished the guide in 10 minutes, making many suspicious. Everyone looked down on him again and saw him as being too much of a noob. "Whatever, let's not talk about it anymore. I'll add him to the team and he can just leech off of us. He'll understand once we go in," Happy Sheep said. "Why not let him be the main tank and see what he says?" someone suggested. Everyone laughed out loud. Speaking of this, if 100-player dungeon runs weren't so limited and precious, they would have certainly agreed so they could laugh at him. "Don't joke around. We can let him be a tank when we run a different dungeon," someone else refuted. "He's just leeching anyways. It's not like it matters whether he's there or not. It'll be more efficient with me," someone suddenly interrupted. Everyone turned. Sweat, it was unrivaled Super Hottie. This guy had actually joined the chat. They had been chatting too fiercely and didn't even notice the notification of him joining. "Cough, what, brother, you want to be the main tank?" someone followed up. "Main tank, I looked at a guide. I might need someone to lend me their equipment for the 4th, 5th, 9th, and final boss," Ye Xiu said. Sure enough, this guy had only looked at the bosses. This guy wasn't here to cheat them of their equipment, was he? No one knew what to think, but unrivaled Super Hottie had already joined the team, and they felt too ashamed to say anything to his face. This situation was a bit different than when unrivaled Super Hottie joined Guild Exterminate the Heavens. After all, Ye Xiu had gone to join Guild Exterminate the Heavens himself. He hadn't needed to show his skill beforehand, which was why Crispy Bean immediately doubted his skill. In his current situation, tyrannical ambition had roped him over. Even if everyone doubted his skill, they could talk behind his back, but if they said it to his face, it would make Happy Sheep, who brought him over, feel embarrassed. They might be doubtful of unrivaled Super Hottie, but at least they had to give their team leader face. "How about you be the main tank for now? When we get to the 4th and 5th tank, we can switch," someone said half-jokingly. "Okay, but I don't really remember much about this dungeon, so I don't think I would be able to lead very well," Ye Xiu said. Everyone cried. He had only just looked at the guide and he wants to lead them. Happy Sheep couldn't bear it anymore. "I'll lead. Are you sure you're okay with being a tank? I'll have trouble with the 4th, 5th, 9th, and final boss," Ye Xiu repeated. Okay, I understand. Then let's start and see what happens," Happy Sheep said. "Sure." Ye Xiu said, and then went into the dungeon. He thought I was serious. He actually thought I was serious. Someone spoke in the chat again. This person remembered that besides the team chat, he could speak in the guild chat, which unrivaled super hottie didn't have access to. He's already entered the dungeon. As the tank, he's going to start pulling monsters. Shouldn't we hurry up and go in? Another person sneered. What are you guys talking about? The other guild members were curious. A god has come to our guild. Someone inadvertently said the truth. Oh, yeah, an exceptional god, the truth continued. Who? Unrivaled super hottie. Do you see that name? Someone said. How arrogant, how is he a god? A curious person asked. It's hard to say in a single sentence. Okay, stop chattering, let's go in. Happy Sheep hastily said. He didn't think that his team would go to the guild chat to continue this chat. This. Wasn't this equivalent to slapping the guild leader's face? This guy was the person the guild leader had told him to bring over to the guild, yet his team was laughing at him. Sure enough, the branch guild leader saw the chat and messaged Happy Sheep privately. What's up with this person? Happy Sheep explained what had happened to let the guild leader know that his team wasn't trying to slap his face, but that this person really didn't seem like any sort of expert. Then let him be the main tank and see what happens. The branch guild leader instructed. Fighting in tomb in the sky with that equipment. Happy Sheep felt scared just saying it. What equipment does he have? The branch guild leader clearly didn't know the details. Happy Sheep explained. The branch guild leader furrowed his brows and then said after a short pause, he should be able to fight against the mob monsters, right? Let's have him fight with the mob monsters first. Okay, the king's avatar.